Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Inman family. William Inman and Sandra's story began in 1983 when they met at church. He was 18 and she was 16. With their parents' approval, they quickly got married and moved to Logan, Ohio. William was a devoted religious man who worked as a builder. In his free time, he volunteered at the Evangelical Church of the Tabernacle of Faith near Nelson Villa, where he played musical instruments. Meanwhile, Sandra, as a housewife, supported her husband's spiritual activities. In 1984, the couple had their first child, a son named William Jr. To prevent any confusion, the church community referred to the father as Bill and the son as Will. Over the years, Will grew up. In 2001, at the age of 17, he met 15-year-old Summer Cook at a church service. Their meeting was strikingly similar to the love story of Bill and Sandra. The young couple dated for 3 years, and in 2004, after Summer turned 18, they got married. They quickly settled into Will's parents' large house in Logan. In the same year, 39-year-old Bill Inman declared himself a spiritual leader and turned his garage into a temporary church, where he started holding services. Although local residents were initially skeptical of him as a self-proclaimed pastor, his church began to gather followers. It started with neighbors and gradually expanded to their acquaintances. People were drawn there to pray, seek comfort, and make donations. In 2005, Will and Summer joyfully welcomed a son named Alex. However, they soon encountered financial challenges. Will's work at the church did not provide enough income, so the family chose to seek better opportunities in another state. In 2006, the Inman family relocated to Florida. They soon found jobs in the construction industry, building hotels in their new location. Meanwhile, Sandra and Summer looked after their home and raised little Alex. After 2 years, however, they missed their hometown and decided to return to Ohio. Unfortunately, they had lost the right to repurchase their previous house in Logan while they were away, so they had to rent a different place in rural Vinton. In 2008, shortly after returning, Will and Summer welcomed their second child, a daughter named Kale. 2 years later, they had their third child, another daughter named Alana. Despite the difficulties of raising young children, Will and Summer made an effort to carve out time for themselves. Almost every weekend, they entrusted their kids to Bill and Sandra, who happily embraced their roles as grandparents. For this elderly couple, their grandchildren brought immense joy and purpose to their lives. In the spring of 2010, Bill Inman was officially appointed as a pastor of the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith. Alongside his wife, he established a charitable organization named Ranch of Mercy, which was created to assist those in need, particularly people who had lost their jobs or homes. Bill had a vision of constructing a large shelter for orphans and widows, intending to build it himself. Unfortunately, he faced challenges due to insufficient funding to make this dream a reality. Bill proposed holding a lottery to raise funds. He planned to sell tickets for $10 each to reach his financial goal. The winner will receive either a new house or $200,000. Bill also promised to give away 99 other valuable prizes in a raffle. Information about the lottery was shared through local media and advertising. Bill went door to door, encouraging people to support the cause by buying tickets, assuring them that the money raised would be used to build a shelter for those in need. In total, Inman sold 100,000 tickets and raised $1 million. The prize draw is set for September 2010. While Bill was busy with charity work, issues were developing in the Inman family. In June 2010, Summer informed her husband that she wanted a divorce after 6 years of marriage. Before this conversation, she had written a painful entry in her diary, expressing that she was very tired of trying to please everyone and felt exhausted. She questioned whether she deserved happiness and if she had the right to fall in love again and feel loved in return. She acknowledged that it might not be the best time, but she felt the need to tell Will the truth, believing he deserved to know that she did not want to be with him anymore. She mentioned that she needed time alone to figure out who she really was, as she felt like she was just following orders at that moment. Summer emphasized her love for her children, stating that she wouldn't trade them for the world, but she did not want them to see their mother merely obeying someone else. She expressed uncertainty about how Will would react, fearing that he might get angry, try to take the kids, or even threaten her. She believed they should share equal time with the children, but she knew his parents would oppose this and try to persuade her to stay, although she realized that wouldn't change anything. She also recounted that yesterday, Will had asked her what she wanted, but she couldn't answer because all she knew was what she didn't want, to be unhappy and feel trapped. Yet, she remained silent every day, saying that all she could do was cry and sleep. She admitted that she just didn't know how to escape the situation and make everything right, hoping that when she wrote again, she would have found the answer. Summer filed for divorce and moved out of the Inman's house with the children and essential belongings to her parents' home. She wanted to ensure that Alex, Kale, and Alana could still communicate with their father, so she allowed them to visit Will and his parents. 2 months after leaving her husband, Summer began a relationship with Adam Peters. At the same time, she took a job as a cleaner at a bank in downtown Logan, as she had no formal education and struggled to find other employment. Meanwhile, September and October passed, but the drawing that Bill from Ranch of Mercy had promised never took place. It also became clear that construction on the prize house hadn't even started, and the Bill family was slow to refund people's money for the tickets. In early December 2010, the Inmans received notice that they needed to leave their rented home due to unpaid debts. After this news, Summer, accompanied by Adam, went to collect their belongings. However, Will and his parents refused to let her in. Summer called the police, claiming that Will was threatening her and wouldn't return her personal items. When officers arrived, Will continued to deny entry. He threatened to shoot Adam, and even got into a confrontation with a police officer. In her statement, Summer explained that before their wedding, she and Will appeared to have a perfect relationship, but everything changed after they married. Will became controlling and jealous, making unfounded accusations. He dictated her actions and invaded her privacy, affecting her eating habits, household responsibilities, and even their sexual relationship. Summer was so restricted that she couldn't sleep without his permission. He essentially kept her confined to the house and took away her phone and keys. She revealed that Will had always wanted to have 12 children with her and had even considered marrying a second wife. He frequently visited websites for polygamous families, where he shared explicit photos. Will also threatened to kill Summer if she tried to leave him. At one point, he took her cherished cats, drove them far away, and then lied, saying they had escaped through an open window, laughing and claiming she would never see them again. After Summer accused him of wrongdoing, Will attempted to defend his actions by saying he took her phone and keys because he thought she was being unfaithful. Regarding the cats, he claimed he took them to a shelter because they were scratching the furniture and being aggressive to family members. Eventually, Will was ordered to stay away from Summer, and he received a fine and probation for his actions. A custody battle began between the two families. The Inmans reported to the police that Adam Peters posed a danger to Alex, Kaylee, and Alana. A frightening incident occurred late on the night of March 22, 2011. 25-year-old Summer was finishing her shift at the bank. As usual, she cleaned up her workspace and went outside around 11 p.m. to take out the trash. Before leaving, Summer had sent a message to Adam, whom she was supposed to meet after work, but he never saw her again. Concerned, Adam went to the bank after midnight. He couldn't find Summer, but near the trash can he discovered her belongings, her phone, keys, and a running music player with headphones on. A little further away, he found her jacket in the bushes. Adam called the police and notified Summer's parents about her disappearance. Initially, the family thought that she might have been late from work or misplaced her belongings. However, the bank security service informed them that she hadn't been seen since her shift ended. When the police arrived, several witnesses were already present. 2 women jogging nearby reported that they had seen Summer being kidnapped about an hour earlier. They explained that as Summer approached a dumpster, a Ford Crown Victoria, driven by a blonde woman, pulled up. 2 men wearing black balaclavas exited the vehicle, grabbed Summer, and forced her into the back seat. Despite her attempts to resist, scream, and plead for help, one of the witnesses who tried to intervene was met with pepper spray from the female driver. The kidnappers then drove away with Summer. The 2 women rushed to the nearest police station to report the incident, but for some reason, law enforcement was skeptical and even suspicious of their account, suspecting they might have fabricated the story for amusement. A whole hour had passed after Summer's parents called the police before they finally arrived at the crime scene. Unfortunately, by that time, it was too late for them to find Summer while the trail was still fresh. News of the abduction of 25-year-old Summer Inman quickly spread through local media. Hundreds of residents of Logan joined the search effort, but as days went by, hope of finding her alive began to fade. Summer's parents struggled to keep their thoughts away from the worst possible outcome. A few weeks prior to the tragedy, Summer had posted a picture on Facebook with Adam and the children, depicting what appeared to be a happy family. This photo infuriated Will Inman, Summer's husband. It had been revealed that Summer met Adam before deciding to divorce Will. In the spring of 2010, Adam started working for the Inmans, maintaining their house and yard, and he soon developed feelings for Summer. Initially, she rejected his advances, but eventually, she gave in. In her diary, she reflected on that moment, expressing that when their eyes met, she realized she had let the devil take hold of her and ignored the warnings from God. She mentioned that she tried to walk away, with her mind screaming to run, but she stayed and allowed Adam to embrace her, expressing her regret and guilt. Meeting Adam marked the beginning of the end for Summer and Will's marriage, as she realized that she wanted to pursue happiness, love, and to be loved, which ultimately led her to file for divorce. 5 days before Summer disappeared, Will attempted to challenge the alimony payments in court. He wanted to reduce the amount he had to pay his ex-wife from $150 per child each month to $50, as his annual income was only $6,500. Will, along with his parents, sought sole custody of the children, but the judge denied their request. Bill and Sandra deeply missed their grandchildren, who were the center of their lives. Since separating from Summer, the elderly couple had visibly lost weight and appeared weary. In March 2011, shortly after Summer went missing, the police found the Inman family, Bill, Sandra, and Will, were hiding in Bill's mother's house in Jackson County, Ohio. During questioning, all 3 of them consistently denied any involvement in Summer's disappearance. They explained that on the night she vanished, they had traveled to Cleveland to look at a new house. However, their car broke down, and they spent the entire night trying to fix it on the side of the road. They returned home to Logan the following morning. The Inmans stated that they had always treated Summer well and rarely had conflicts with her. However, they noted that after Adam Peters came into their lives, things took a turn for the worse. Bill, Sandra, and Will described Adam as a negative influence who had ruined their previously happy family. The police took an interest in a white Ford Crown Victoria that was parked near the Inman's house. They seized the car's GPS navigator and examined its route. They discovered that on the afternoon of March 22, when the kidnapping took place, the car was in Logan. The GPS was turned off at 5:30 p.m. that evening and only activated again the following morning, March 23, still in Logan. There was no evidence that the Inman family ever came to Cleveland. Additionally, Phone records indicated that the suspects remained in Logan throughout the night from March 22 to March 23. On the morning of March 23 at 7:30 a.m., Bill, Sandra, and Will were seen at a car wash, where they had the car thoroughly cleaned inside. Summer was not with them. Afterward, the Inmans traveled to Cleveland, where they changed the tires at an auto repair shop. The mechanic found it unusual that Bill chose to replace nearly new tires with older ones. Additionally, the Inmans attempted to alter the car's appearance, and Bill removed a spotlight that he had previously installed near the side mirror. After the arrest, Bill attempted to reassure his elderly mother that they were innocent and that the trials they faced were a form of divine punishment. However, after several hours of intense questioning and realizing that all three could face the death penalty, Sandra eventually broke down. She confessed that they were responsible for the kidnapping of Summer on that tragic night. The men wearing balaclavas were identified as her husband, Bill, and her son, Will. Sandra explained that the abduction was entirely her idea. She intended to scare her daughter-in-law into allowing Will to see their children, but things quickly spiraled out of control. She stated that Will would admit to guilt for both murder and kidnapping. Sandra acknowledged that it was her idea to take Summer, explaining that she believed this would frighten her. Will tied Summer's hands, feet, and neck with plastic ties. Summer struggled and screamed, but then suddenly lost consciousness. Upon noticing that she was unresponsive, Will panicked and wanted to cut her free. He called out to his mother, asking where the knife was because he couldn't find it. As the family desperately searched for the knife, precious minutes passed. It was too late, and Summer had suffocated. Sandra insisted that they never intended to harm their daughter-in-law. Their goal was simply to scare her in order to resolve a custody dispute over the grandchildren so they could see them on weekends. On March 29, 2011, 1 week after the abduction, Sandra revealed the location where they had hidden the body. Summer was placed in an abandoned well on the property of the church that the Inman family attended, known as the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith, which is situated near Nelsonville, 30 kilometers from the bank where Summer worked. Bill Inman had previously helped build this church, and 28 years ago, he and Sandra got married there under its arches. When the police removed the concrete lid from the well, they discovered a disturbing scene. Summer was at the bottom, her body positioned head first. She was dressed in the same outfit she had worn on her last day, a black t-shirt that read, "I don't have an anger problem, I have an idiot problem." The autopsy revealed that Summer had died from strangulation. Besides the marks left by plastic ties on her neck, wrists, and ankles, there were no other injuries on her body. Sandra originally intended to dispose of the body in the river. However, she later thought the church well would be a safer place where it wouldn't be discovered. She confessed to her crime and showed genuine remorse for her actions. The trial soon followed. Bill, 49, and Will, 28, both pleaded not guilty to Summer's murder. Throughout the hearings, they spoke very little and avoided making eye contact with her parents. In contrast, Sandra took full responsibility for the crime, reiterating that the abduction was her idea. As she delivered her final statement, the woman tearfully pleaded for forgiveness from Summer's parents. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sandra clearly expressed her deep regret for the tragic events. "Summer was like a daughter to me," she cried. "If I could turn back time, I would never have made this terrible choice." In 2012, the court sentenced Bill and Will Inman to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sandra received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 15 years. The church friends and parishioners all agreed that Bill was the one controlling everything in the Inman family. He made all the decisions. No one thought that the idea of the kidnapping came from Sandra. It was well known that Will had been spoiled as a child, with his parents giving in to his every demand. Sandra realized that both her husband and son were as guilty as she was, but she continued to plead guilty, hoping that it would lessen the consequences for them. Alex, Kale, and Alana were cared for by the parents of Summer, who had passed away for an extended period. They struggled to explain to their grandchildren the absence of their mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather. The tragic story of the Inman family highlights how concealed anger, jealousy, and a need to control others can result in devastating outcomes. Bill and Sandra, who appeared to embody piety and strong family values to everyone, revealed themselves to be oppressive figures to their daughter-in-law. Summer found herself trapped in a toxic relationship that stifled her will and desires. Her efforts to escape ultimately cost her life. Will, who was raised in this oppressive environment, became selfish and resistant to compromise. His obsession with reclaiming his wife and children at any price ultimately led to his downfall. The terrible crime committed by the Inman's family shattered multiple families, leaving 3 young children without their mother and a grandfather and grandmother without their beloved family member. This story highlights the importance of letting go of grudges, respecting others' boundaries, and building relationships based on trust and respect. Holding on to anger can eventually lead to outbursts that damage the most valuable aspects of our lives.
Molly Nicole Watson was born on December 15, 1982, in Moberly, Missouri. Her parents, Timothy and Sandy, and her brother Tim, have always created a warm and supportive home. Diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, Molly embraced her differences and forged ahead with resilience and determination. Those who have come into contact with her often describe her as energetic, creative, and extremely passionate. Molly earned a master's degree in psychology and dedicated her career to education. She lived in a colorful and creative world filled with Harry Potter books, comic novels, Disney characters, and intricate cosplay costumes. Her creativity even extended to designing her own nail polish line. Her home was her sanctuary, packed with books, fantasy, and the comforting presence of her 5 cats. She was a unique mix of strength and gentleness, calm yet unapologetically herself. In her mid-20s, Molly married, but the relationship ended in divorce after 2 years. Not long after, she discovered she was pregnant before her son was born. Molly began a new and unexpected chapter, a relationship with Amber Brady, a childhood acquaintance. Though not close when they were younger, reconnecting years later brought them together. Both women were fresh from failed marriages, and what began as a surprise blossomed into a meaningful and fulfilling partnership. When Molly gave birth to her son, Declan, who was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, Amber was by her side. Together, they supported each other through life's challenges. After her maternity leave, Molly began working at the Moberly Area Correctional Center, where she met James Addy, a married Navy veteran and corrections officer 16 years her senior. Despite their differences, Molly and James grew close. James confided in Molly, claiming that his marriage to his wife Melanie was ending. Believing him, Molly allowed their friendship to develop into a secret affair. They discreetly met in motels, hiding their relationship, Molly from Amber and James from his wife. The truth unraveled when Amber spotted Molly with James at a gas station. Growing suspicious, Amber eventually followed Molly to a motel and confronted her. That confrontation marked the end of Molly and Amber's relationship. Now free from the constraints of her past, Molly is openly dating James and is madly in love with him. However, her friends noticed something unusual. Molly paid all the bills, while James was cold, distant, and unwilling to commit fully. Despite this, Molly believed he was the one. In October 2017, James told Molly that his divorce had been finalized, filled with happiness and hope. Molly took the initiative and proposed. After James agreed, she threw herself into planning the wedding with joy and excitement. She envisioned a Disney-inspired celebration based on Beauty and the Beast, with burgundy and gold as her chosen colors. Molly hired a wedding planner, makeup artist, hairstylist, and even purchased 2 wedding dresses because she couldn't decide between them. She documented her journey on a new YouTube channel, radiating happiness as she shared her plans. Her eyes sparkled in her videos as she spoke with enthusiasm and sang softly in her princess-like voice. To Molly, the wedding felt like a real-life fairy tale. As the big day approached, however, life took a darker turn. At the end of 2017, James's ex-wife Melanie was involved in a severe car accident that left her on life support. James had to step in to care for their children, and Molly stood by him during this difficult time. They considered postponing their wedding, but ultimately decided to proceed with their plans. In April 2018, just days before their wedding, Melanie unexpectedly passed away. Despite the heartbreak, Molly pressed on, handling the final wedding arrangements alone, while James focused on planning Melanie's funeral. The situation was deeply tragic, but Molly remained determined to prepare for what she thought would be the happiest day of her life. Amid the grief, a surprising detail came to light. Melanie wasn't James's first or even second wife. She was his fourth. Before meeting Molly, James had been married multiple times. When they went to the courthouse to apply for their marriage license, the process turned uncomfortable. James appeared anxious, avoided direct answers about his marital history, and seemed reluctant to share details. Molly either didn't notice or chose to ignore these red flags. Her love for James outweighed any doubts or concerns. However, Molly never made it to the altar. On the night of April 27, 2018, just 2 days before the wedding, her body was found on a remote gravel road in Monroe County. What initially seemed like an accident quickly developed into a homicide investigation. At the scene, investigators found no evidence of a struggle, and none of Molly's belongings were missing. Her jewelry remained untouched. Inside her car, police discovered wedding-related documents, including plans and checklists, everything bearing the name James. These clues led them directly to James's home. Around 2:30 a.m., officers knocked on James's door. However, instead of meeting a grieving fiancé, they encountered a woman, his wife, Melanie. This was shocking because Melanie was supposed to have died just days earlier in a hospital after a severe car accident. As it turned out, James had fabricated the entire story about Melanie's death. She was alive and still married to him, yet he had simultaneously planned to marry Molly. Both James and Melanie were taken in for questioning. Initially, detectives did not realize that Melanie was the woman James claimed was dead, only that they were dealing with James, who was allegedly involved in a murder while still married. Melanie, on the other hand, was blindsided. Melanie knew who Molly was, but thought she was just one of James's co-workers. When questioning turned to Molly's death, Melanie assumed the police were merely speaking to people who knew her. The truth came as a devastating shock. Melanie had no idea that her husband had been unfaithful, let alone engaged to another woman. James's double life had been so carefully hidden that Melanie, who lived in the same house as him, never suspected a thing. She told investigators that James came home every night like clockwork and showed no signs of dissatisfaction or a secret life. In hindsight, she began recalling suspicious details, such as how he often arrived home 2 hours late, which he brushed off as extra work or traffic. She had never pushed for explanations, and only now did the pieces begin to fall into place. Police uncovered that James had been living a double life for years. To Molly, James had claimed he was in the process of getting divorced, but in truth, he had never even filed for divorce. When questioned about his marital status, he invented a dramatic story about how his wife, Melanie, had been in a terrible car accident, was in a coma, and later died. Molly believed him. She trusted the man she loved and had no reason to doubt his word. Using this fictional story to hide his shady past, James accepts Molly's proposal and plans a wedding with her that he knows will never happen. When James's deception finally came to light, investigators began treating him as a suspect. Melanie provided a timeline for the night Molly was murdered. James had told her he was meeting a friend at 7:30 p.m., but he returned home closer to an hour later, claiming his friend had cancelled. However, Melanie and their teenage daughter contradicted his story. They recalled James arriving home closer to 10 p.m., far later than he had claimed. The timeline wasn't the only issue. Their daughter remembered that James went straight to the shower when he got home and then immediately started a load of laundry. For detectives, this behavior was telling. It suggested that James might have been trying to clean evidence like blood, dirt, or gun residue from his clothes. His alibi quickly unraveled. Police arrested James and scheduled formal questioning for the next day. Melanie, devastated by James's infidelity and deceit, returned home after giving her statement. Despite her heartbreak, she had to maintain a facade of normalcy for her daughter, who was excitedly preparing for a school dance. But behind closed doors, Melanie began searching for answers. Her investigation led her to the attic, where she uncovered shocking secrets hidden in a trunk: photos, letters, souvenirs, and evidence of a double life her husband had lived for 7 years. James had taken trips with another woman, Molly, claiming they were work-related or outings with friends. The betrayal was overwhelming. Melanie stayed composed for her daughter, but privately, she was unraveling a terrifying truth. This was not just a case of infidelity, but something far darker: murder. For nearly a decade, James had juggled 2 relationships, maintaining 2 homes and nearly entering into 2 marriages. But it all came to light when Molly, his mistress, was found dead. James's teenage daughter, Emma, didn't learn about her father's secret life from him or her mother. Instead, she discovered the shocking truth through an online news article her classmates had seen. Her world, once private, was now laid bare for everyone to see. For a teenager, the humiliation was unbearable. Whispers, stares, and judgment followed her through school hallways. As the story made national headlines, Emma uncovered even more heartbreaking details about her father's betrayal and Molly, the woman he had planned to marry. While reading news reports, Emma remembered she had met Molly before. Years earlier, her father had brought her to Molly's home to help sew a cosplay costume. At the time, Emma believed Molly was just a friend. Now, the memory seemed painfully clear as Emma and her mother, Melanie, struggled to come to terms with the betrayal. Law enforcement continued connecting the dots, building a case against James. At the scene of Molly's murder, investigators found tire tracks matching James's car. His vehicle had mud on it, consistent with the rural road where Molly had been killed. More damning evidence surfaced when they recovered a white t-shirt nearby, customized by Emma as a gift for her father. The t-shirt contained traces of gunpowder and Molly's DNA, making James the prime suspect. While the bullet that killed Molly was too damaged to be traced to a specific gun, the circumstantial evidence against James was strong. Phone records revealed that James had called Molly the night she died, speaking with her for 20 minutes near the site where her body was discovered. Additionally, Glenn McParron, the man who found Molly's body, testified that he had briefly encountered a white man, around 50 years old, near the scene that night. Prosecutors argued this man was James. Prosecutors argued that James's motive was fear. Molly had grown suspicious and had begun searching online for information about James's wife, Melanie. She found no obituaries or hospital records because Melanie was still alive. Once Molly discovered the truth, prosecutors believed James saw her as a threat to his secrets. Instead of ending the affair or confessing, he allegedly decided to silence Molly permanently. What made his crime so alarming wasn't just its brutality, but also its carelessness. James left a shirt designed by Emma at the crime scene and his name on documents in Molly's car. He behaved as if his actions couldn't be traced, but the evidence trail he left behind was glaring. The trial began on April 26, 2021, with prosecutors presenting tire tread analyses, forensic evidence, and witness testimonies to reveal the full scope of James's actions. Melanie testified, stating that she had no knowledge of her husband's affair and describing him as controlling, manipulative, and fully capable of murder. Emma's testimony added a chilling layer to an already disturbing case. She recalled her father, James, coming home late after 10 p.m. on the night of Molly's death. He went straight to the shower, and soon after, the washing machine started running. The strong smell of bleach filled the house. Emma remembered how nervous and on edge he seemed, behaving uncharacteristically. He lingered near her, silently, watching, then eventually walked away. Melanie revealed that during Molly's murder, she was still married to James, living under the same roof, and believing her life was normal. She had no idea her husband was leading a double life, using a separate phone to communicate with another woman. By the early hours of April 28, 2018, Melanie was grappling with an avalanche of devastating revelations. She discovered that her husband of more than 20 years had been planning to marry another woman. James had even fraudulently signed a marriage license, claiming to be divorced. The fantasy life he had woven with Molly was built on deception and ultimately ended in violence. Melanie had been unaware of his infidelity, that he had told others she was dead, and that her name was used to invent a fabricated tragedy. On the night of the murder, James had left their house in blue jeans, a black jacket, and boots. The next day, after the police left, Melanie began searching their home. Something felt off. She noticed his black jacket was missing, questioned him about it, but never got an answer. Her search led her to the garage, where James had parked a maroon car, unusually inside rather than outside, where he normally left it. Her suspicion deepened. During his trial, James Addy refused to testify in his defense, but submitted a written statement, a love letter to Molly, the same woman he stood accused of murdering. This act felt either disturbingly delusional or deeply arrogant. Later, he requested a new trial, claiming inadequate defense representation and alleging that some evidence in his favor had been withheld. However, the jury was unmoved. In July 2021, James Addy was convicted of first-degree murder and armed criminal action. He received a life sentence without parole, plus an additional 10 years. To the end, he declared his innocence and vowed to appeal. Reports surfaced of James confessing to a fellow inmate, bluntly stating that he ended up in prison because someone ended up face down in a ditch. By then, the damage was irreparable. In April 2018, instead of celebrating a wedding, Molly's family and friends gathered to bury her. What should have been the start of her new life became the date now etched on her headstone. But the tragedies didn't end there. In the ensuing months, her parents, Timothy and Sandy Watson, also passed away, unable to bear the devastation of losing their daughter. Sandy experienced severe psychological trauma after Molly's murder, and her mental health rapidly declined. Timothy, who devoted himself to caring for his wife during this time, succumbed to a heart attack in September 2020. The relentless stress, grief, and sorrow had taken its toll on him as well. Neither of them lived to see justice done or hear the guilty verdict in the courtroom. They were not there to witness the man responsible for their daughter's death being led away in handcuffs. Meanwhile, Molly's son, Declan, was left without a mother. After her death, ensuring his care became a priority. Thankfully, he was placed with relatives who were raising him in a loving and supportive home. A small glimmer of hope in an otherwise heartbreaking story. Tim, Molly's brother, now acts as the spokesperson for their family. In court, he addressed the jury with not only grief, but also a profound sense of urgency. He spoke of the devastating impact of Molly's murder, how the loss of his younger sister had not only been a terrible shock, but had also brought with it the loss of his parents. He shared how his mother had succumbed to mental illness, his father had passed away from grief, and how the absence of his 3 loved ones had left a painful void in his life where there had once been joy. Tim implored the jury to deliver justice, emphasizing that Molly had dreams, a career, and a son. She had been a bright, passionate individual full of life, but everything was taken from her in a single, selfish act. Tim told the jury that James had mercilessly chosen to take Molly's life and urged them to deliver a verdict that showed no mercy to him in return. Nanette Krentel grew up in New Orleans in a humble, close-knit family. Her parents, Dan and Pat Watson, raised her along with her siblings Kim, Eliza, and 3 half-siblings and taught her important values of loyalty and kindness, known for her gentle and caring nature. Nanette had a deep love for animals and shared her home with 2 cats and a dog. Despite moving away, she maintained a close bond with her family, especially her father and sisters, speaking with them daily. In 1994, at 27 years old, Nanette met Steve Krentel while applying for a job at his office supply store. Steve, then 28, owned both a scuba gear business and the store, and was going through a divorce at the time. Their professional relationship soon turned romantic, and after Steve finalized his divorce, he introduced Nanette to his young son, Justin. By 1995, they were married. Steve's native of Louisiana. He grew up near Lacombe and reportedly had a tense relationship with his brother, Brian. In 2000, Steve and Nanette moved to Lacombe, closer to his parents. He gradually worked his way up in the Tammany Parish Fire Department, eventually becoming the fire chief. Respected for his professionalism, his career in the fire department provided him with financial security and influence in the community. In 1997, after Steve sold both of his businesses, Nanette shifted her career path. She began working at a daycare center, where her kind and attentive nature earned the trust of parents and co-workers. Beyond her job, she became involved in the community, organizing fundraisers and charitable events, as well as supporting local fire departments by selling handmade ceramics and baked goods. By 2017, she had been out of the workforce for several years, focusing instead on her home, her pets, and continued community involvement. Although she had no children, Nanette was always concerned and attentive to the lives of her loved ones. She often played a central role in family matters, offering emotional and financial support to her loved ones. To outsiders, she and Steve seemed to lead a peaceful life, residing on 100 acres of scenic remote property in Lacombe. However, behind closed doors, Nanette grew increasingly concerned for her safety after Steve's brother, Brian, was released from prison. Brian allegedly blamed Nanette for the legal issues that led to his incarceration and had made direct threats against her. In response, she urged for additional security measures, having cameras installed around the property and keeping protective tools in her bedroom, car, and purse. She openly shared her fears with her family. Her father and sisters, aware of the escalating tension, were alarmed but did not anticipate just how grave the situation would become. Steve was also concerned and worked with Nanette to increase security. He installed additional cameras, purchased self-defense equipment, and even practiced shooting with her at a local shooting range. However, despite these precautions, the simmering problems in their family did not go away. Behind the facade of a peaceful life, there were bitter family conflicts, growing tensions, and the choices ahead led to unforeseen consequences. On July 14, 2017, at around 2:30 p.m., the St. Tammany Parish Fire Department received an urgent call from Steve's cousin, who lived nearby. He reported seeing thick smoke rising from Steve's property and suspected the house was on fire. Despite the distance between their homes and the dense forest in between, the fire was visible from afar. Steve and his team arrived at the scene around 3 p.m. when the house was engulfed in flames. Firefighters worked into the evening to extinguish the fire, only to discover human remains in the bathroom of the master bedroom. The damage was extensive, but the location of the remains and the fact that no one else lived there indicated the victim was likely Nanette, Steve's wife. No alarms had sounded, and throughout the day, Steve's repeated calls to both Nanette's cell phone and the house landline had gone unanswered. Her car remained in the garage, further confirming she had been home at the time of the fire. Tragically, all the household pets also perished, reflecting the sudden and intense nature of the flames. Federal fire investigation specialists joined the inquiry. Initially, the fire was considered a possible accident, but the circumstances surrounding Nanette's death raised suspicions. Her remains were found in the bathroom, and there was no indication she had tried to escape. This prompted a forensic autopsy, which included DNA testing and an investigation into the cause of death. About a week later, during a memorial service, part of the coroner's preliminary findings became public. It was revealed that Nanette had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, with a bullet found in her skull. This discovery completely shifted the direction of the investigation. On July 18th, the sheriff confirmed the findings, apologized for the delay in communication, and acknowledged evidence of a criminal act. Further autopsy results showed no smoke inhalation in Nanette's lungs, proving that she had died before the fire. Since no weapon was found near her body, the possibility of self-inflicted injuries has been ruled out. The investigation further revealed the presence of 9 security cameras on the property, but Steve stated that the system had stopped functioning several days before the fire. Efforts to recover footage from the damaged equipment were unsuccessful. This lack of evidence, combined with forensic findings, suggested the fire had been intentionally set to destroy evidence. Investigators shifted their focus to individuals who might have had both motive and access to the property. However, an official statement confirming foul play in Nanette's death was not released until 4 days after the fire. The family's frustration with the investigation grew, particularly because the coroner had noted the gunshot wound the day after the incident, yet this information wasn't immediately shared with them. Nanette's sister, Kim, a prosecutor in Nebraska, publicly criticized the investigation, pointing to the lack of proper scene containment, which may have compromised evidence. When Nanette's relatives arrived in Louisiana shortly after the tragedy, they found the property unsecured and the house open. Within 2 days, Steve was allowed to return to the site, raising concerns about evidence being altered or lost. It wasn't until Steve's son, Justin, discovered a fragment of a human skull in the debris that authorities finally secured the scene. The incident has left the public losing confidence in Sheriff Randy Smith's department. While federal investigators conduct an independent analysis, they discovered multiple points of ignition and traces of accelerants, confirming the fire was deliberately set. Despite these findings, however, the sheriff did not rule out the possibility that Julie harmed herself, citing the lack of a recovered weapon and inconclusive ballistics test results. Later, 2 firearms were found in the remains of the home, but neither could be definitively linked to the fatal shot. The bullet recovered from Nanette's skull was too damaged for reliable analysis. Additional forensic tests reinforced previous findings, including finding no smoke in Nanette's lungs and no food in her stomach. Despite her having been seen purchasing food at a fast food restaurant that morning, additional inconsistencies came to light during the investigation. There was no blood on Nanette's gunshot wound to the head, as is often the case, leading to speculation that her body may have been moved after her death. An independent expert suggested that whoever moved her was likely familiar with the layout of the house. The sheriff, however, publicly disputed the forensic expert's conclusions. This discrepancy with the findings of federal agents further undermined public confidence in the investigation. Nanette's family began openly questioning the integrity of local authorities and raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest. As discrepancies mounted, the sheriff was eventually compelled to issue a public statement, acknowledging that Nanette's death resulted from a violent act. Despite this admission, the investigation failed to identify the person responsible. The case shifted towards exploring possible motives and suspects with access to the property. Nanette's husband, Steve, was naturally a key subject of interest due to his unrestricted access to the house. He willingly cooperated, volunteered for a polygraph test, and passed. However, since polygraph results are not entirely reliable, investigators didn't eliminate him as a suspect. Steve's alibi was backed by fire department security footage confirming he was at work on the day of the incident, starting at 8 a.m., and didn't leave at any point, including during lunch. This was corroborated by surveillance footage and his co-workers' testimonies. However, it was noted that Steve, working on a Friday, was unusual, as he usually took that day off. Investigators also analyzed Nanette's movements on the morning of July 14th. Traffic cameras spotted her driving between her home and a nearby fast food restaurant. where her bank card was used to buy food. Her car was later seen near her house. About an hour later, a phone call was made from Nanette's phone to an unfamiliar number. The person on the other end claimed not to know her, and the reason for the call remains unexplained. Investigators explored potential personal conflicts and discovered that Steve had been in an extramarital relationship with a colleague. Nanette was aware of the affair and had told others she was considering divorce, which under state law would involve dividing their shared assets, an arrangement that could have been financially disadvantageous for Steve. When questioned, Steve admitted to the affair but claimed the couple had reconciled and planned to stay together. Close family members were also questioned. Steve's son, Justin, had reportedly experienced tension with his stepmother, Julie. In the past, family acquaintances described him as having unusual interests, including a fascination with firearms. However, Justin provided documentation proving he was out of state for work on the day of the incident, which was verified, ruling him out as a suspect. Investigators also looked into Steve's brother, Brian, who had a criminal record and a history of family conflicts. Over the years, Nanette had voiced concerns about his behavior. Shortly after his release from prison, she sent her sister a message describing a specific threat from him, in which he allegedly displayed aggressiveness and hinted at setting the house on fire. These claims were corroborated through their text exchanges. Surveillance footage from their parents' home showed Brian did not leave the premises on the day of Nanette's death. However, a wearable tracking device issued to him malfunctioned and failed to record any location data that day, with the cause of this failure unexplained. Another puzzling incident occurred a month before Nanette's death. A security camera recorded an unidentified man near the entrance gate of the property. He left behind a cigarette butt and a knife. Nanette informed her father about the incident, but the man's identity remained unclear and no investigation was conducted to find out more. After investigating multiple leads, the case remained unsolved. Every suspect either had a confirmed alibi or there wasn't enough evidence to make a formal accusation, leaving the investigation at a dead end. 2 months after Nanette's death, the sheriff made another public announcement. He declared that Steve was no longer a person of interest in the case, explaining that Steve's alibi had been verified. There was no clear motive, and the evidence was deemed insufficient to move forward. However, Nanette's family felt this announcement was premature, as not all digital records had been reviewed. Several witnesses had yet to be re-interviewed, and a detailed timeline of her phone activity leading up to her death was still incomplete. It appeared the investigation was entering a state of stagnation. When Nanette's family requested access to the case documents, their attempts were met with vague responses. Louisiana state law restricts access to investigative materials to the closest next of kin, which in this case was Steve, not Nanette's parents or sisters. Steve did not share these documents with the rest of the family. In search of answers, Nanette's relatives turned to private attorneys and independent forensic experts. One expert, after examining the available evidence, identified signs of deliberate investigative mismanagement, noting that critical protocols for handling cases involving violent deaths and burnt evidence had been disregarded. The conclusions and methodologies of the private experts sharply contrasted with those of the local authorities. Efforts to transfer the case to a different jurisdiction proved unsuccessful. Appeals to the district attorney's office were dismissed, with officials citing a lack of legal justification to relocate the investigation. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Nanette's family turned to social media, launching a page to provide updates and highlight inconsistencies in the investigation, in the hope of pressuring authorities into action. However, the sheriff's actions became a significant obstacle to achieving transparency. His public statements, dismissal of expert findings, and personal connections to individuals potentially linked to the case raised concerns about his impartiality and deepened public mistrust. Despite multiple individuals with potential motives, the investigation failed to reach a definite conclusion. Detectives worked on verifying alibis, analyzing technical records, and identifying gaps in the official narrative. But these efforts often revealed inconsistencies that undermined the credibility of the evidence. A key issue was the absence of location data from the Jeep's-enabled ankle monitor worn by Brian. On July 14th, the day of the incident, the monitor registered no location data, an unexplained blackout. Authorities were unable to determine whether the failure was a technical error or whether the monitor had been intentionally disabled. This missing data represented a major accountability failure and raised serious questions. Another troubling discovery came from a review of footage from a security camera inside Brian's parents' home. The video depicted Brian with a working desk lamp and a visible wall clock in the background, ostensibly providing an alibi. However, Nanette's family questioned the authenticity of this footage, suggesting it could have been pre-recorded or staged. Experts also observed that the angle and focus of the camera appeared unusual for a standard household surveillance setup. Additional uncertainty arose with surveillance footage from a fast food establishment showing Nanette's vehicle. Investigators assumed she was driving the car that morning, but the video quality was too poor to verify her identity. This assumption was based solely on her bank card being used to make a purchase nearby. The situation was further complicated by the fact that there was no footage from her home surveillance system on the day of the incident. Steve claimed the cameras had not been operational at the time, but investigators later found traces of accelerant on the damaged equipment. Experts concluded that the security system had likely been intentionally tampered with before the fire, suggesting someone with knowledge of the camera's locations and purpose had interfered. After Nanette's father passed away, her sisters took the lead in demanding a proper investigation. They launched an online awareness campaign, collaborated with advocacy groups, and participated in discussions on crime-focused platforms. The family repeatedly urged state authorities to transfer the case to an independent investigative body, but their requests were consistently met with generic responses that lacked meaningful action. They were also frustrated by the investigators' failure to review footage from the citywide surveillance system, which could have offered critical context. These shortcomings formed the basis of formal complaints to the district attorney's office. Although officials promised to keep the case open, there was no evidence of real progress, receiving minimal support from local law enforcement. Nanette's family shifted their focus to building a network of allies. They connected with organizations specializing in unresolved cases, which led to increased attention on Nanette's death through podcasts, videos, and media coverage. By 2024, the case remained unsolved. However, new hope appeared when Colin Sims was elected district attorney. Colin publicly expressed his willingness to review the evidence, marking the first sign of possible investigative progress after nearly 7 years of inaction. As of March 2024, Nanette's case was still open, with no charges filed against any suspects. Despite coroner findings, witness testimonies, and independent assessments, authorities in St. Tammany Parish had yet to identify any responsible parties. What initially seemed like a straightforward case had instead devolved into a prolonged stalemate. By mid-2025, the case records were still sealed, and only individuals with legal standing, such as Nanette's husband, Steve, were granted access. The family remained barred from reviewing complete investigative reports, transcripts, or relevant surveillance data. Repeated appeals to state authorities went unanswered. In response, a grassroots group formed by Nanette's friends and family continued to provide social media updates, urging the public to come forward with any useful information. The family also sought assistance from federal agencies like the Department of Justice. In their letters, they raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest involving local authorities and petitioned for the case to be transferred to a higher jurisdiction. Independent experts consulted by the family identified numerous investigative avenues that had not been fully explored, including recovering deleted digital records, and re-interviewing key witnesses. However, without official investigative authority, these proposals could not be enforced. Despite years of stagnation, Nanette's family has never stopped fighting for answers. For them, this is about more than personal grief. It is a pursuit of justice. The lack of progress has only strengthened their resolve. They firmly believe the truth can still be uncovered if independent expertise is brought in and the case is reviewed impartially. As of this report, the case remains open but inactive. Nanette Krentel's story highlights how errors, delays, and possible bias can obstruct justice in a major case. Yet, it also demonstrates the unwavering resilience of a family determined to keep her memory alive. Their goal remains unchanged: to uncover the truth, no matter how much time has passed or how many obstacles stand in their way. It was a calm night in the semi-rural Melbourne suburb of Mornington. A small family was getting ready for bed. A pregnant mother was sleeping upstairs, her little girl was tucked in her bed, and the father was quietly moving around the house. Everything seemed normal, no loud arguments, no signs of trouble. By the next morning, things were seriously wrong. What really took place that night? John Miles Sharp was born on February 28, 1967, in the small coastal town of Mornington, Victoria. He was the middle child in a large family with 6 siblings. Unlike his siblings, John was quite different. He was withdrawn, quiet, and struggled with extreme shyness. From a young age, he found social situations overwhelming, which often left him feeling drained. While his brothers and sisters easily made friends and played with others, John stayed on the sidelines, dealing with anxiety and feeling out of place. His closest relationships were with his parents, as he found the outside world to be unfriendly and unwelcoming. School was not a refuge for him. He had a few classmates he talked to, but no genuine friendships and no one to share his thoughts with. Nonetheless, he persevered and graduated. By the 1990s, he found a job at the Commonwealth Bank, and that's when everything started to change. Anna Kemp entered John's life like a ray of sunshine. She was cheerful, outgoing, and full of energy, a confident, intelligent woman from New Zealand. At 27, John was younger than Anna, who was 31. Despite their differences, they were drawn to each other. Anna's warmth complemented John's quiet steadiness. Working together every day allowed them to grow closer, and soon they fell in love. After a year of dating, they officially became a couple and married in October 1994. Although Anna was far from her family in New Zealand, she maintained a strong connection with them, especially her mother. They often spoke on the phone, sharing love, encouragement, and updates about her new life in Australia. Anna came from a deeply religious background, and her faith was a strong foundation for her life. For her, marriage was not just a legal contract, but a sacred commitment. After the ceremony, once they settled in and the honeymoon phase passed, Anna began to notice something she hadn't recognized before. John had changed. He became quieter, colder, and emotionally distant. She later shared with friends and family that it felt like something vital had been turned off. The relationship suddenly felt empty, lacking passion. Although John would have outbursts of anger, Anna remained committed because she believed in their vows, in making an effort, and in the importance of giving it time. In August 2002, Anna experienced immense joy with the birth of her daughter, Gracie. Becoming a mother was one of the happiest moments of her life. However, shortly after Gracie was born, doctors diagnosed her with hip dysplasia, which meant she needed to wear a corrective orthopedic brace for the first 3 months. This made for a difficult start. Anna spent sleepless nights caring for Gracie and adjusting to her new role as a mother. In contrast, John struggled to connect with their daughter. From the beginning, he was distant, showing no warmth or affection. Multiple sources indicated that he felt resentment towards Gracie, even going so far as to call her a harsh name that revealed a troubling lack of empathy. Her cries frustrated him, and her needs interrupted his life. The marriage was falling apart. Anna shared with her family that there was constant tension in the house. Communication was minimal, and even minor decisions turned into arguments. She wondered if their difficulties were due to lack of sleep or if they were simply going through a tough time. Anna hoped that as Gracie got older, things would improve. Unfortunately, the situation only grew more unstable. Shortly after Gracie was born, John made a significant choice. He quit his job at the bank. He began working from home as a conveyancer, handling the legal paperwork for real estate transactions. This change provided him with flexibility and independence. He operated his business from a small office in their home, becoming even more isolated than before as he was already a withdrawn person. As time passed, Anna noticed that John's choice wasn't driven by ambition, but rather by a desire to escape. He was struggling with the pressures of his job, the extended hours, relentless demands, and interactions with others. John found this environment overwhelming, as he was not naturally social. Dealing with clients, leading a team, and navigating a busy workplace exhausted him more than he admitted. Now, he was trying to avoid it all. In September 2003, a significant change occurred for the family. John and Anna purchased a new house. This house was bigger and located just a few streets from John's childhood home, where his parents still resided. While it seemed like the start of a new chapter, the atmosphere inside felt different. Instead of laughter, the walls of their new home were filled with silence. The tension between John and Anna was not only present, it was intensifying. In November, Anna discovered she was pregnant again, this time with a boy. She was excited and shared the news with a close friend. Their little girl, Gracie, would soon have a sibling. However, John's reaction crushed that dream. He didn't smile, hug her, or show any joy. Instead, he questioned whether the baby was really his. Anna later shared with her loved ones that John harbored resentment. Instead of celebrating the news of the second pregnancy, he reacted with cold irritation. He wasn't simply indifferent, he was deeply troubled. To him, the pregnancy felt like an added burden rather than a blessing. He began to struggle emotionally, finding it hard to sleep and hardly speaking to anyone. He withdrew into himself, becoming increasingly silent and irritable. Eventually, he consulted a doctor and was diagnosed with insomnia. Although he was given sleeping pills, they were ineffective. Night after night, he lay awake in darkness, consumed by thoughts that told him everything was going wrong, that life was overwhelming, that no one understood him, and that it would be easier if he didn't have to keep up the facade of being a supportive husband, father, and man who had everything under control. On March 23, 2004, Anna was in her second trimester of pregnancy. That day, the whole family, John, Anna, and Gracie, went to a birthday party for their nephew. To everyone else, they seemed like an ideal family. Anna had already picked out a name for the baby, Francis. Even a close friend who had been staying with them that week noticed nothing out of the ordinary. They looked like any typical family. The next morning, Anna dropped Gracie off at nursery school as usual. Later that day, she called a friend, and they arranged to meet in a few days. The day after that, she reached out to her private health insurer to add her unborn child to her policy. 2 days later, on March 23rd, an argument occurred. The specifics of the conversation are unclear, but it was serious. That night, after the argument, they went to bed around 9 to 10 p.m. Anna was likely asleep when John got up, walked downstairs to the garage, and retrieved a spear gun. He then returned to the bedroom and shot his pregnant wife in the left temple. When she did not die immediately, he shot her again. Afterward, he covered her bloodied body with a blanket and went downstairs to sleep on the couch. The entire incident took only a few minutes. The next morning, John got up, dressed Gracie, and took her to nursery as if everything was normal. He started to fabricate a story, claiming that Anna had left him for another man and that she intended to come back in a few days to pick up Gracie. However, Anna's family didn't believe him. They tried to reach her through calls and messages, but received no response. This silence was incredibly frustrating for her mother, as Anna had always been in touch, even when she traveled abroad. Now, there was only silence. Worried and increasingly frantic, Anna's mother reached out to her local parish priest in New Zealand, who had known the family for many years. She explained that she hadn't heard from Anna since Monday, despite sending messages that had gone unread. The priest noticed her distress and recognized that Anna's silence meant something was wrong. He decided to take action and contacted the police in New Zealand. As a parish priest and a respected member of the community, his worries were treated with utmost seriousness. Soon, investigators would start uncovering the truth behind John's elaborate deception, revealing a situation much more troubling than anyone could have expected. Initially, authorities did not regard the situation as a criminal case. They believed that Anna might just need some time alone, possibly to avoid difficult conversations or feelings of embarrassment. However, as days passed, her silence became increasingly concerning. The New Zealand police decided to take the situation more seriously and transferred the case to Australian officials. Officers in Victoria were then asked to conduct a welfare check at Anna's home in Mornington. Anna had a meeting planned with a close friend on March 26th, with the time and location already confirmed. However, before the meeting could take place, an unusual event unfolded. The friend received a phone call from John, who informed her that Anna would not be attending. He shared the same story he had told others, that Anna had left him and Gracie for another man. The friend was shocked. She had known Anna for years, and they had shared everything, so this news was hard to believe. Nevertheless, she felt a strong instinct to not ignore what she had heard. As concerns about him grew, John was busy hiding his actions. He had purchased the spear gun since early 2003, claiming he needed it for fishing. Although he never used it, he paid in cash, leaving no evidence of the purchase. On the night he killed Anna, he slept on the sofa. The next morning, he prepared Gracie and took her to nursery just like any other day. When he came back home, Anna's body was still upstairs. He attempted to remove the spears from her skull, but only succeeded in unscrewing the metal tips. The blades remained embedded. He then dragged her body to the backyard and buried it in a shallow grave. Life continued as usual, at least outwardly. By Saturday, 4 days after Anna's death, John was still acting as though everything was normal. He followed his usual schedule, dropping Gracie off at nursery, picking her up, making her dinner, and putting her to bed. However, that evening, once she was asleep, a darker side of him emerged. He started drinking. John was preparing to commit another terrible act. This time, it was against his own daughter. When he felt ready, he took a spear gun from the garage and shot his daughter in the head, penetrating her skull. As the child was injured and screaming, John retrieved the 2 spear shafts he had earlier removed from his wife's head and returned to the bedroom. He shot both spears into Gracie's head, but she was still alive, so he removed 1 spear and shot again, finally killing her. The next morning, John returned to the bedroom and pulled the 2 spears out of her head. He then wrapped her body in a garbage bag and a tarpaulin and dumped her body at the Mornington Waste Transfer Station. He also disposed of the spear gun, the spears, some of Gracie's clothes, and toys. In the days that followed, John made an effort to maintain his deception. He accessed Anna's email account and began sending messages to her friends and family, pretending to be her. He wrote that she was happy, in love, and pregnant again with her new partner. If anyone questioned his story, John would say she had her phone. Something felt off to those who knew Anna well. The emails she sent were unusual. Their tone was inappropriate, cold, and mechanical, lacking the warmth, humor, and affection that defined her. Although the words resembled her writing style, the essence was missing. John might have thought that being far away in New Zealand would shield him and allow him to control the situation. Then, unexpectedly, the doorbell rang. Police officers from Victoria stood at his door. John appeared surprised, but remained composed. He recited a well-prepared account of events. He said Anna had left on March 23rd, returned a week later to pick up Gracie, and that he had only seen her a few times since. He claimed they had discussed separation, the baby, and their futures. He insisted that Anna no longer loved him and that the baby wasn't his. He tried to project an image of a hurt man, betrayed and abandoned. He wanted others to see him as the victim, but deep down, he sensed the instability beneath him. That same day, after the police had visited, John went to a hardware store. He bought duct tape, 2 tarpaulins, and a chainsaw. Once home, he dug up Anna's body from the shallow grave in the backyard and dismembered her. He wrapped the body parts in tarpaulin and duct tape, then drove them to the dump to dispose of them. He replaced the blood-stained mattress and got rid of Gracie's cot to keep up the facade that Anna was still alive. He continued to access her email and sent messages from her account. He even used her bank card to buy flowers for her mother, pretending they were from Anna, a disturbing act to maintain the illusion. The truth was starting to surface. A police investigation was ongoing, and the media had picked up on the story. In a shocking moment that captured the nation's attention, John appeared on live television. He pleaded for Anna to return home, asking her to call or give any indication that she and Gracie were safe. He expressed his love for them, stating how much he missed them and that he still cared. John wasn't genuinely grieving. He was pretending. At that moment, he had already given a written statement to the police, claiming he had nothing to do with Anna and Gracie's disappearance. He repeated his story to everyone. Anna had left, but the investigators didn't believe him. Although they lacked sufficient evidence to arrest him, they decided to keep him under surveillance. They followed him to Chelsea Beach, the place where John had said Anna had gone. There, he has left something in the bushes. After he left, the officers moved in to search the area. What they discovered changed everything. Hidden in the bushes were Anna's mobile phone and bank card. John had been using her items to maintain his lie. He returned to that spot regularly to create a false trail and support his deception. But now he had been caught. John Sharp was arrested and charged with the murders of his wife, Anna, and their daughter, Gracie. Initially, he maintained his innocence, repeatedly denying any involvement. However, as the investigation intensified and the questioning became more pressing, John eventually confessed to killing both Anna, who was 41, and Gracie, who was just 20 months old. After his confession, police began a large-scale search of the local landfill based on his information. They sifted through every ton of waste by hand for 3 weeks. On July 6, 2004, they discovered the bodies. The grim reality was now clear. When asked about his actions, John didn't show any regret. Instead, he shifted the blame to Anna. He told the police that she was moody, controlling, and unhappy. John claimed that Anna prevented him from seeing his family as often as he wished and insisted that their marriage was already over. He thought he could raise Gracie alone, but later confessed he was scared of being a single father and felt overwhelmed by her crying. He also admitted that he had never really bonded with her. During the trial, a forensic psychiatrist described John as socially awkward and deeply withdrawn, unable to face his own problems. Experts believed he saw his home life as a prison from which he couldn't escape. He lacked the skills to resolve conflicts, communicate effectively, or seek help. John told doctors that during the murders, he felt like a different person, but tests showed no signs of psychosis. He was aware of his actions. The psychiatrist found that John was experiencing moderate depression, which affected his perception of reality but didn't completely impair his judgment. During the sentencing, the judge delivered a strong condemnation, calling the murders premeditated and cruel. He pointed out that John had killed his wife out of resentment and referred to Gracie as a defenseless child who depended on him both legally and morally. On August 5, 2005, the court sentenced John Sharp to 2 consecutive life terms, with a non-parole period of 33 years. In court, he sat with his head down, breathing heavily and wiping away tears, not for Anna or Gracie, but for himself. Following his conviction, more disturbing details came to light. Members of John's extended family disclosed that he had abused a young relative for 2 years, only stopping when she turned 18. The victim expressed that the most painful part wasn't just the abuse itself, but the realization that if she had spoken out sooner, perhaps Anna and Gracie would still be alive. After the trial, 3 more individuals came forward, claiming John had previously behaved inappropriately around children, both within the family and in other close settings. For years, No one spoke up. The victims, still children at the time, were too frightened. It was only after the murders that they finally found the courage to break their silence. John's relatives say that Anna was unaware of his past when they got married, but she later might have learned something. Both Anna and Gracie were buried under Anna's maiden name, Kemp. There was also a name engraved on the stone, Francis, their unborn son who never had a chance. Even though he never drew breath, he is remembered. The crimes committed by John shocked Australia and the world. A father who harmed the very people he was supposed to protect. He left behind deep sorrow and unanswered questions that may never be resolved. John resides in protective custody while incarcerated due to threats on his life from fellow prisoners. Amy Beth Lord was born on December 21, 1988, in Springfield, Massachusetts. Her family moved to Wilbraham shortly after her birth, where she grew up with her two close sisters, Kimberly and Carly. The siblings shared a strong bond and enjoyed a loving family environment. After graduating high school in 2007, Amy pursued higher education at Bentley University, focusing on humanities, business, and marketing. Thanks to her remarkable intellect, she excelled academically and earned her bachelor's degree in 2011, becoming a certified marketer. Following her studies, Amy aimed to kickstart her career, relocating to Boston, Massachusetts. There, she quickly found a position as an internet marketing specialist and worked for 2 years. Life was going well. She made close friends and was in a relationship with Mike Cassell, with whom she was planning to start a family. On July 23, 2013, at 5:38 a.m., 24-year-old Amy was in the lobby of her apartment building. She had woken up early to meet her friend and co-worker, Christina Kelleher, for a gym session at 6 a.m. However, when Amy didn't arrive, Christina waited at the bus stop for a while before deciding to go to the gym alone, assuming her friend had overslept and didn't want to wake her. Although Amy was usually very punctual, Christina wasn't too concerned and expected to see her at work later, as their desks were next to each other. After finishing her workout, Christina was surprised to find that Amy was still not at the office. Feeling alarmed, she reached out to Mike, Amy's boyfriend, to check if he knew where she was. He had no idea and mentioned that he assumed Amy had gone to the gym. Over several hours, Mike and Christina tried repeatedly to reach Amy, but they were unsuccessful. At 11:30 a.m., Christina decided to contact the office manager. They had already called all of Amy's friends and acquaintances, but no one knew her whereabouts. Consequently, the management opted to report her missing to the police. After taking the report, the officers contacted Amy's parents, who had also not seen her. They agreed to meet with her relatives at her apartment in South Boston to investigate further, which happened around 2 p.m. Detectives searched the apartment for any evidence of a struggle, robbery, or other criminal activity, but found nothing out of order. Everything appeared to be in its place, and the locks were secure. It seemed that Amy had simply vanished. Her family emphasized that she led a happy and organized life. She had no plans for sudden trips and wouldn't have run away without informing anyone. They believed something must have happened to her. A contact lens belonging to Amy was discovered in the building's foyer, and there were also marks on the nearby wall that suggested a possible confrontation. To gather more information about Amy, police interviewed her parents in detail. They revealed that Amy was driving a black Jeep Cherokee SUV. Shortly after, an officer recalled that at 8:37 a.m. in southern Boston, a fire had been reported. At that location, they found an SUV fully engulfed in flames. The fire department extinguished the fire and then towed the vehicle for further investigation. The car's description matched Amy's SUV. She had not yet been officially reported missing at that time. Although the license plates were completely burned away, the lab was able to identify the chassis number of the burned vehicle, confirming that it belonged to Amy Lord. Detectives returned to the station and started verifying Amy's bank transaction data. They discovered that her bank cards had been used to withdraw money 5 times that morning. Beginning at 6 a.m., The total amount withdrawn was approximately $1,000, and the withdrawals were made from different ATMs. This raised suspicions because it was unusual to withdraw money repeatedly from various locations in the city. The first transaction took place near her apartment. When the police arrived, they noticed a surveillance camera beside the ATM. They reviewed the footage, hoping to spot Amy in the morning recordings and gain insights into what happened. The process of reviewing the footage took considerable time, and officers examined recordings from all the ATMs where Amy's card had been used. They also found additional surveillance equipment on nearby buildings. All this evidence was gathered to piece together a clear timeline of events from that morning. While police were working with banks to collect footage, they received a call around 4 p.m. from a cyclist who had found a body at the Stony Brook Reservation in Hyde Park. The body was that of a young woman. Upon arrival, detectives discovered the victim was naked and had suffered over 40 stab wounds, primarily to her neck, face, and chest. There were also hand marks on her throat, suggesting she had been strangled. Her body was dumped in a secluded area covered with foxes, far from the city, but the killer did not attempt to conceal it. No identification was found. However, based on police photographs, they believed the victim was Amy Lord. Once her identity was confirmed, the missing person case transitioned into a murder investigation. The analysis of the CCTV recordings from the ATMs has been completed. The first sighting of Amy was at 6:35 a.m. She appeared alone at the ATM in her workout clothes and appeared uninjured. She used her ATM card and left. At 6:47 a.m., she arrived at another ATM just a few blocks away. This time, the camera captured her car from the outside. Amy was again unharmed and wearing sportswear. She withdrew cash by herself. However, her behavior was unusual. The police observed that, while the car was parked outside the bank, she was sitting in the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat. About 7 minutes later, she appeared in another video, this time with visible facial injuries, including a broken nose and several bruises, indicating she had been attacked. It seemed she had been kidnapped, yet she did not attempt to escape. Amy withdrew cash again and returned to the car, remaining in the passenger seat. Detectives tracked the car's movements throughout the city and obtained more recordings in an effort to identify the driver. The first shot showing Amy in the passenger seat and the driver behind the wheel was captured at 6:10 a.m. This helped them establish a timeline of events, but they still could not identify the driver's face. While reviewing the footage, the police noticed that the driver was hiding his face, possibly with a t-shirt or a headband. He wore a cap, and in one clip, when he adjusted it, it showed that he had a clean-shaven head. Detectives needed to find the exact moment Amy was abducted, so they continued gathering information from CCTV cameras. This effort led them to capture the moment Amy left her apartment. As soon as she opened the door, she was attacked by an unknown man who had been waiting outside. Pacing back and forth, he forced her inside, and they stayed behind the closed door for about 15 minutes. At 5:52 a.m., both of them came out and walked toward Amy's car. This suggests that the first cash withdrawal happened while she was being threatened. This information helped the police piece together the sequence of events. As soon as she left her apartment, preparing for a workout before heading to work, she was kidnapped. The attacker likely persuaded her that if she gave him enough money, he would let her go. As a result, Amy did not resist and complied with his demands. After withdrawing the required amount from her card, she was taken out of town and attacked with a knife. Following the murder, her body was left in a wooded area, and her car was set on fire. The police were unable to obtain a clear image of the suspect's face. Investigators questioned Amy's relatives to check if anyone might have wanted to harm her, but she had no known enemies. Her boyfriend had a strong alibi and was ruled out as a suspect. The attacker needed gasoline to set the car on fire. In the video footage from when the attack started, the attacker was not seen carrying anything that looked like fuel. Therefore, he must have bought it at a gas station. After the attack, He drove 10 kilometers to a country park to dispose of the body before returning. Detectives reviewed all intersections with cameras where the perpetrator might have been seen. The investigation was challenging because the victim drove a common car. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of black SUVs in the city, but her relatives pointed out a distinctive clue, a cloverleaf-shaped sticker on the rear window. This made it easier to track her car in traffic and locate the gas station where the attacker had stopped. Unfortunately, the surveillance camera at that station wasn't working. Detectives noticed a liquor store across the street that had a front camera. They obtained some footage, but it was too distant to clearly see the criminal's face. At around 8 a.m., the suspect arrived at a gas station without Amy. The car was recognizable because of a cloverleaf-shaped sticker. Although the driver's face was not seen, he waved at someone and approached another person. They exchanged a few words, shook hands, and then the suspect's companion left. Fortunately, this person came closer to the liquor store's CCTV camera, allowing him to be identified. The police located him, had a conversation, and he revealed that he met his friend, 28-year-old Edwin Alamany, near the gas station. At 8 a.m., Edwin was in a black SUV that had not been seen before. He previously worked as a waiter's assistant and was currently unemployed. Early in the morning, on July 23, 2013, around 4:23, another resident of South Boston, Alexandra Cruz, was attacked just before Amy was kidnapped. Alexandra was walking to her job at Dunkin' Donuts when a stranger assaulted her in the parking lot, hitting her in the jaw and causing her to briefly lose consciousness. The attacker then began to strangle her, but suddenly stopped, claiming he had made a mistake and was looking for someone else. He threatened to kill her if she screamed. He took her valuables and turned away for a moment, giving her the chance to escape. Despite his threat that she would be killed if she reported him, Alexandra did not keep quiet. Once she arrived at work, she called the police. About an hour later, an officer came to take her statement, and they created a composite sketch of the assailant. During the investigation at Amy's apartment, the police received another urgent call. Around midnight in South Boston, a girl was stabbed. Detectives quickly recognized that this crime occurred near Amy Lord's apartment. This led them to believe they were dealing with a serial attacker, as there had already been 3 similar incidents involving girls. The investigation needed to continue, as the officers received a new call. 21-year-old Kaylee Ballantyne was attacked shortly after midnight. She was the only daughter in her family, raised alongside 2 older brothers, which may have contributed to her ability to defend herself. Her parents described her as a fighter from a young age. All the children in the family were athletic, but despite her delicate appearance, Kaylee displayed remarkable strength, sometimes even outdoing her brothers. In 2003, when she was just 11, she faced a serious incident when a basketball backboard fell on her head, leaving her in a coma for a month. Fortunately, she survived, recovered fully, and even resumed playing hockey. When the police spoke with the victim of the latest attack, Kaylee was injured, but still alive and able to recount her night. She had been working and was heading home around midnight. With her headphones on, she didn't notice any danger right away. As she approached her apartment, she noticed a suspicious-looking man on the opposite side of the street. He was large and appeared to be watching her. Then, he crossed over to her side, stopped, and stared at her for about 5 seconds. This made her feel uneasy, so Kaylee hurried her steps. She got to her apartment and went to enter the code to get in. Initially, she entered it wrong, but got it right on the second try. When Kaylee opened the door, the man was right behind her. He put his hand on her left shoulder and pushed her through the door, his right hand holding a knife to her head. Kaylee fell to the floor, and the attacker pushed down on her, sitting on top of her. She pleaded for her life, asking him to take anything he wanted, but he began to stab her without saying a word. In a desperate attempt to protect herself, Kaylee crossed her left arm over her chest and started to fight back with her right hand. She also kicked at him. During the struggle, she successfully knocked the attacker's hand away, causing him to accidentally hurt himself and loosen his grip. Sports weren't merely a hobby for Kaylee, she was a professional athlete, strong and resilient, which helped her find the strength to fight back. This moment gave her the opportunity to save her life. After her attacker fell backwards and Simple walked away. As he walked away, Kaylee slammed the door behind him so he couldn't come back. She remembered that she didn't know how many times she had been stabbed and that she didn't really feel any pain when it happened. She tried to stand up, but she collapsed and her chest tightened. She wondered if it was her adrenaline, if she was dying, and knew she needed to get into her apartment. Kaylee said that for some reason, her apartment key was in her pocket, which made it much easier, so she crawled to the apartment door, unlocked it, and went inside. Once inside, she crawled to her first roommate's room and told her that she had just been stabbed and that she needed her to get towels, tissues, or anything to stitch up the wound and then call 911. She insisted on calling her loved ones, worried that she might not make it through the attack. Her friends stayed calm and encouraged her to call emergency services first. Meanwhile, the neighbor took a video of everything Kaylee said. Remarkably, she managed to remain calm, even though she had sustained serious injuries: 2 stab wounds to her face and 2 to her neck. In total, the attacker had stabbed her 9 times, with 1 wound puncturing her left lung and another coming dangerously close to her heart. The trial of Edwin Alemany started in 2015 and lasted for 14 days. The key witness for the prosecution was Kaylee, the survivor. During her testimony, she displayed such inner strength that Edwin could not even look her in the eye. Alexander Cruz, the first victim, also testified against him. Edwin's defense attorney attempted to downplay his violent behavior, arguing that Edwin had tried to end his own life by cutting his wrists, which resulted in scratches on his neck and arms. Ultimately, Edwin was found guilty of first-degree murder for Amy's death, armed robbery, aggravated assault with a weapon, and attempted murder of Kaylee Ballantyne and Alexander Cruz. He never accepted responsibility or showed any regret for his actions. On June 9, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Amy and received an additional 35 years for the attacks on Kaylee and Alexander. When Kaylee gave her final statement, she shared her challenges in trying to live a normal life. Her heartfelt words brought many people in the courtroom to tears. Amy's parents gave Kaylee their late daughter's necklace as a token of gratitude for her testimony, which helped convict a dangerous criminal. However, Edwin, the criminal, never showed any remorse. In October 2020, he approached a federal judge to complain that his lawyers had been ineffective by opting for an insanity defense and admitting his guilt without his consent, despite him claiming he was innocent. In 2021, the state Supreme Court upheld his conviction. Edwin then hired a new lawyer and tried to formulate a different strategy to gain immediate release by pointing out the mistakes made by his previous attorney and the prosecution. However, these attempts were unsuccessful. After Kaylee recovered from her injuries, she returned to school and graduated from university. She lived in Boston until Edwin's case was resolved. After that, she decided to move to California to find peace away from big cities, hoping to cope with her post-traumatic stress disorder. Gradually, she healed from her psychological trauma and even began to dream again, which felt like a significant achievement. During this period, she felt intense anger towards Edwin for taking Amy's life and nearly ending hers too. Kaylee struggled to understand what could drive someone to such senseless cruelty. Over time, however, she began to feel pity for Edwin, recognizing the flaws in his character that led to his actions. Eventually, she wrote him a letter of forgiveness, but never sent it. It remained in her desk for 2 years. Then Kaylee tried to contact Edwin's lawyer, but received no response. Later, during a sermon about forgiveness at her church, she was reminded of the man who nearly took her life. Coincidentally, the pastor was visiting the prison where Edwin was held, so Kaylee asked him to deliver her letter. 2 weeks later, she received a response. In his letter, Edwin discussed his hard childhood. He was born in Puerto Rico and moved to the United States without speaking English. He shared the difficulties he encountered both at work and in his personal life, including experiences of bullying during his childhood. These challenges resulted in behavioral issues that ultimately led to him being in juvenile prison for a significant part of his youth. Initially, Kaylee felt compassion for him after reading the letter, but a few weeks later, she discovered that he was trying to appeal his case, claiming that his tough upbringing had broken him. This revelation made her question his sincerity, as she suspected he was trying to gain her sympathy. As a result, she decided not to reply to him. In the end, his appeal was denied, and he remains in prison. Kaylee hopes he is attending school and working on self-improvement. She believes he didn't ruin her life. Instead, he improved it. Kaylee has decided to turn her circumstances into something positive and feels happier than ever. Even though she faces daily anxiety and various challenges, she continues attending therapy and strives to maintain a positive outlook. After spending some time in California, she returned to Maine, where she currently resides. As a public speaker, she shares her story to inspire and support others who have experienced trauma. About a year ago, she stepped back from public speaking and is now seeking new ways to share her message. Kaylee feels passionate about her story because it has the potential to connect with others and create positive change in their lives. Currently, she works in marketing, is in a loving relationship, and has recently purchased her first home.
Hello everyone. Today, we will learn about another case. The case of Zachary Davis. Zachary Everett Davis was 15 years old when he committed a particularly cold-blooded and senseless murder. Just a couple of years later, he gained notoriety on the internet after a chilling interview with Dr. Phil McGraw. In that interview, he details the murder, what he felt, and what was going on in his mind. The Davis family lived in Hendersonville, Tennessee. The family included Chris, the father, Melanie, the mother, and their two sons, Josh and Zachary, who were just a year apart in age. This close age made them more like best friends than typical brothers, as they spent a lot of time together playing and hanging out. Overall, the Davis family appeared to be happy and normal, except for Zachary, the younger son, who was a challenging child. He was quiet, shy, and emotionally distant, often displaying obsessive behaviors due to his sadness. Then, as Zachary grew a bit older, some strange symptoms began to manifest, and it became clear that he was suffering from a mental illness. This situation was a significant challenge for both Zachary and his family, but they persevered and sought help from various specialists. In 2009, Chris Davis, the father of the family, passed away from motor neuron disease, also known as ALS. This degenerative condition affects muscle control, leading to a gradual loss of movement over time. Individuals with ALS often become unable to walk and may need a wheelchair. The disease also impacts speech, making it slurred and difficult to understand. And in some cases, it can completely rob patients of their ability to speak. Witnessing a loved one endure this painful decline is incredibly challenging, unfortunately. The Davis family underwent this firsthand as they watched Chris decline until his death. This experience deeply affected the entire family, especially Zachary, who was very close to his father. After his father's passing, Zachary's behavior changed significantly. He became withdrawn and fell into depression. His mental health worsened, making daily life a struggle. He was hospitalized multiple times. He was diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia and depression stemming from his loss. A psychotherapist was assigned to him, and Zachary attended 4 therapy sessions before he stopped going, since he was only 12 at the time. His mother, Melanie, took him to the appointments. For reasons unknown, she eventually decided to discontinue the therapy sessions and instead began taking him to a doctor. Whether Zachary resisted therapy or his mother was too busy, he ultimately received no support for his mental health issues despite his challenges. Zachary made an effort to lead a normal life. He attended school, but he rarely interacted with anyone there. while he went to class. His classmates found him odd because he never initiated conversations. For instance, if someone smiled at him, he wouldn't smile back. He would simply look away. He only spoke when absolutely necessary, such as when a teacher addressed him or when an important question was asked. When he did talk, his voice was very soft, almost a whisper. As if he were hesitant to join the conversation, Zachary had no friends. Likely because he did not enjoy socializing or meeting new people, his only close companion was his older brother, Josh. They played and spent a lot of time together before their father's death. After Chris's death, Zachary became withdrawn and seemed to prefer that state. His classmates noticed that he wore the same hoodie every day and often kept the hood up when he was outside, which displayed unusual behavior, unlike his brother. Josh, who was active, participated in sports, had many friends, and frequently attended parties. Zachary chose to isolate himself in his bedroom. He showed little interest in going outside or engaging in a lively, varied life. He did enjoy reading and watching movies, especially horror films, which were his favorite genre. He also had a fascination with true crime documentaries and became overly engrossed in real-life criminal cases. Sometimes idolizing the criminals, this interest was unhealthy. While watching crime films, Zachary exhibited no empathy for the victims and instead became captivated by the killers. Viewing them as role models, he kept multiple notebooks because he loved to write and draw. One of these notebooks was always with him and served as a diary where he recorded his feelings and daily experiences. When Zachary turned 14, he told his mother that he had started hearing voices. Specifically, there was one voice he heard every night that caused him so much stress he could hardly sleep. This voice belonged to his deceased father and said many distressing things. Concerned, Melanie took Zachary to a psychiatrist. Unfortunately, his condition only worsened initially. Zachary only heard the voice at night when he was trying to sleep, but eventually it began to occur all the time, and he found himself constantly talking to it over the next few years. Zachary's mental health continued to decline, and he did not receive adequate support, although he had a diagnosis. He did not attend regular therapy sessions and likely wasn't on any medication after the loss of Chris. Melanie tried to balance work and household responsibilities while spending quality time with her sons. She worked hard to create a sense of normalcy in their lives by organizing family activities and planning fun outings. On August 10, 2012, Melanie took her sons to the movies, and they all had a wonderful time. After the movie, they returned home late and went to bed, however. Zachary had different plans for the night. He packed a backpack with notepads, pens, a toothbrush, a change of clothes, a ski mask, gloves, a hammer, and a knife. He then zipped up the backpack and went to the garage to retrieve a heavy sledgehammer that the family kept there. Around 11 p.m., Zachary picked up the sledgehammer and walked to his mother's bedroom. He paused at the door. Looking at his mother, was asleep, with the lights off. In that moment, he felt completely clear-headed. He approached her, lifted the sledgehammer, and began to strike her repeatedly with all his strength. He did this with such brute force that her blood splashed all over the room. The force of the blows caved in his mother's skull. Zachary recounted that his mother regained consciousness after the first or second blow, but she couldn't speak. Instead, she started to have convulsions during this time. Her eyes were open, and Zachary glanced into her eyes while he struck her with the sledgehammer, even though his mother was looking at him. She was unaware of her surroundings or what was occurring. Zachary admitted that throughout the violent attack on his mother, he was laughing, describing it as joyful laughter. 15-year-old Zachary brutally killed his mother in just a few minutes, however. He had more planned. His older brother, Josh, who was 16 at the time, was asleep in his bedroom after killing their mother. Zachary went downstairs with a bloody sledgehammer, leaving a trail of blood in the hallway before leaving the weapon in the laundry room. There are conflicting reports about what he did next. Some say he took gasoline, while others claim he grabbed whiskey or another flammable liquid. Zachary then returned to his mother's bedroom and began pouring the liquid everywhere. He also soaked the game room upstairs with the flammable liquid. After setting fires in both rooms, he took a pre-packed backpack and left, allowing the house to burn along with his mother's body and his still-living brother. Zachary's plan went horribly wrong. He wanted the house fire to destroy any evidence of his crime and to eliminate his brother. However, he made a critical error by setting the fires in 2 rooms and then closing the doors. This restricted the fire's spread, causing the smoke alarms to activate immediately. The noise of the alarms woke Josh. He jumped out of bed and rushed to his mother's bedroom. When he opened the door, he was met with a horrifying sight: his mother lying on the bed, covered in blood. In that moment, Josh realized he couldn't save her. She was already dead. Frantic, he ran out of the house to a neighbor's home and called 911. It's hard to fathom what must have been racing through Josh's mind. Everything unfolded so quickly. He woke to the fire alarm, discovered the blaze, and rushed to help his mother, only to find her lifeless body. The sequence of events unfolded rapidly, demonstrating how effectively the brain processes such situations. Emergency services arrived at the scene and extinguished the fire. Unfortunately, Melanie Davis was declared dead on sight, and the police began questioning Josh about what had happened. He immediately informed them that his younger brother, Zachary, who was gravely ill, was missing. Zachary had not been in the house during the fire, prompting the police to issue a missing persons report for him. This information was dispatched to all local police officers, and search teams quickly began their efforts. Knowing that Zachary could not have wandered far, he was located the following morning. About 10 miles from home, the police concluded that as soon as he left the house, he just kept walking, stopping occasionally to make entries in his notebook. When found, Zachary was covered in blood and was still wearing the same clothes in which he had killed his mother, although he had a change of clothes in his bag. It's unclear why he didn't use them. This aided the search, since the police recognized him immediately. They knew he was the suspect and arrested him, taking him to the police station. There, Zachary Davis confessed to murdering his mother and believed his brother had died in the house fire. He intended to kill both his brother and mother, leaving home under the belief that his plan had completely succeeded. During the police interrogation, Zachary was cooperative, providing all the required information and answering every question. However, he showed no signs of guilt or remorse. He appeared cold and indifferent when recounting his actions. He spoke in a way that suggested he felt no emotions whatsoever. When investigators asked Zachary why he committed the act, he stated that he believed his mother deserved to die because she was not a good mother. He felt she had not properly cared for him and his brothers. Zachary said that she made him and his brother do everything around the house, including washing and cooking. He also said that they essentially had to raise themselves, which likely started around the time their father died. Zachary thought it would be futile to communicate his feelings to her. He believed that bringing up his concerns, expressing himself, or attempting to change her behavior would be pointless because he thought she would not listen. As a result, he believed his only solution was to kill her. However, this was not the only reason for the murder. Zachary also experienced distress because he heard the voice of his deceased father every night, which prevented him from sleeping. This voice communicated dreadful things to him. The voice Zachary heard primarily spoke about his mother, Melanie, claiming she was bad and deserved to die. This is what the voice, which Zachary believed to be his father's, conveyed to him, leading him to think that Melanie should die. When the police asked Zachary how long he had been hearing these voices, he said they had been in his head for a long time. Zachary admitted he hadn't planned it for long. He had the idea and organized everything on the same day, carrying it out just a few hours later. He may have even decided to do it before they went to the movies, despite claiming that the idea was spontaneous. Zachary's resentment towards his mother had been building up for quite a while. Zachary explained in his interview with Dr. Phil McGraw that he chose the day of the incident because he was free and saw it as a good opportunity to act. During the interview, Dr. Phil asked Zachary what it sounded like when he struck his mother with a hammer. And, in a chilling moment, Zachary smiled and described the sound as a wet, dull thud. He laughed several times throughout the conversation. Dr. Phil remarked that such laughter is often a sign of nervousness rather than malicious enjoyment. Regardless, Zachary's laughter came across as unsettling. He claimed to love his mother. Though his sincerity was questionable, he acknowledged that they were not close and rarely communicated. Yet there was no animosity between them. The case shocking not only to the public, but also to those who knew the Davis family. While many were aware that Zachary struggled with mental illness, no one expected him to commit such an act against his mother. Zachary also mentioned that he never truly argued with his mother. Instead, he preferred to withdraw during conflicts. So why did he label her a bad mother if there was no real tension? According to him, their mother simply stopped being a mother to them, however. His relationship with his older brother Josh was even worse than his relationship with his mother. Although very few knew about this from the outside, they seemed like best friends during his teenage years. Zachary claimed that Josh abused him severely, even while their mother was at home. It's important to note that Josh was never charged or convicted of any crime, and Josh firmly denies these allegations. He defended himself during a hearing when Zachary's claims were brought up in court as a reason for Zachary's desire to harm him. In court, Josh reiterated that these incidents never occurred. No evidence supports these claims, but it would be challenging to find proof, even if they were true. Zachary claims that this incident significantly influenced his decision to kill his mother. He felt anger towards Melanie. Believing she should have protected him, he felt let down by her because she was in the house when Josh harmed him, but did nothing to intervene. She didn't even notice. It seemed to Zachary that she didn't care, and he allegedly tried to tell his mother what Josh had done. But she didn't want to hear it. Zachary wrote in his diary that she wouldn't listen to him and that she never believed him. She got angry every time he brought up the subject. She yelled at him, saying he was lying. This was one of the few topics they argued about. As they generally did not have many disagreements or conflicts within the family, Zachary revealed that the violence he experienced deeply affected him. Following the incident, he refrained from bathing for several weeks because the bathroom lacked a lock, and he was afraid his brother might break in while he was vulnerable. This led to him smelling very unpleasantly, which further fueled his anger towards his mother. It is hard to believe that a mother wouldn't notice their child had stopped showering, yet Melanie never mentioned this to Zachary. As a result, Zachary began to harm himself, which was the most severe sign of his illness. He expressed thoughts of wanting to kill his mother with a sledgehammer, wishing for her to die a painful death rather than peacefully in her sleep. He fantasized about starting a fire while Josh was still in the house, so that Josh would wake up in panic as the flames approached him. Wanting him to suffer, however, things didn't unfold as Zachary had envisioned, and Josh survived now. Reflecting on these events, Zachary regrets not having followed through with his plan to ensure his brother was dead before leaving the house. Many believe that Zachary was not mentally fit to stand trial, but he was ultimately deemed competent, and the trial proceeded, although he was only 15 years old at the time of the crime. He was tried as an adult. Zachary's defense team presented several factors that may have influenced his actions. They highlighted the death of his father, the voices he claimed to hear from his father, the violence inflicted by his brother, and the alleged neglect he suffered from their mother, Melanie. These were presented as reasons for Zachary's behavior. However, a few days into the trial, an unexpected development occurred. When called to testify about his mother's murder, Zachary claimed he did not commit the crime. This was surprising, especially since he had previously confessed to the police and discussed the incident for months. He now stated that he had no knowledge of who killed his mother and later accused his brother, Josh, of the murder, saying he tried to cover for him by taking the blame. No one believed this new story. As the evidence clearly pointed to Zachary as the perpetrator, it was evident to everyone that he was responsible for the crime, and it was well known that Josh was not involved in their mother's murder. On Friday, June 5, 2014, when Zachary was 17 years old, Sumner County Judge D. David Gay sentenced Zachary Davis to life in prison, with a minimum term of 60 years in Tennessee and the possibility of parole after 51 years, when he is eligible for parole. Zachary Davis will be about 68 years old, whether this murder was a brutal murder or the result of a mental disorder. It is a tragic story of a family destroyed.
On November 26, 1998, during a calm Thanksgiving evening at the Patton home, there was an underlying sense of tension. Melissa, the youngest daughter of Norma and Carl, called to wish her parents a happy Thanksgiving. Their conversation was routine, filled with usual topics like holiday plans, gift selections, and Christmas preparations. Melissa expressed her desire for her children to celebrate the holidays at her parents' house, a tradition they followed every year. However, when Christmas arrived, there was no phone call or knock on the door. Norma and Carl grew concerned, but still hoped their daughter and her family would make a last-minute appearance, as they occasionally did. As the hours went by, without anyone arriving, the gifts sat unopened beneath the tree, shimmering with holiday lights. It all began like any other day. But soon, Norma became worried when several days passed without hearing from their daughter. Melissa usually contacted them when things changed, but this time felt different. The parents attempted to call her, but there was no response. They also tried to reach their son-in-law, Christopher Wolfenbarger, but he was unreachable as well. Melissa, her husband, and their children lived in Atlanta, while her parents resided in their comfortable home in Locust Grove, Georgia. In January, after weeks of worrying silence, Norma and Carl drove to Atlanta. They took the familiar route to the duplex on Brooklyn Avenue. But what they found was heartbreaking. The apartment doors were open, yet the inside felt unsettlingly empty. The rooms were spotless and perfectly arranged, as if their daughter and her family had never lived there at all. It seemed like someone had intentionally wiped away all signs of their existence. Norma went door to door, asking neighbors if they had seen Melissa or her children. One neighbor remembered seeing them loading things into a moving truck just before New Year's, but no one knew where they were going. It felt as though they had left suddenly, without any notice and with no intention of coming back. Norma and Carl were in distress. They felt certain that if something were wrong, Melissa, their daughter, would have contacted them. She had always been honest and communicative. If her plans had changed, she wouldn't have kept it a secret. Norma decided they couldn't ignore the situation. If Melissa and her family had left, someone must know what happened. They reached out to the glass manufacturing company where their son-in-law, Christopher, worked. The management confirmed that Christopher was employed there as a truck driver but had recently been let go due to an accident involving one of the company vehicles. When they inquired about Christopher's future plans, the management had no information. He had simply disappeared along with his family. Time went by without any updates. In January and February, Norma kept trying to contact Melissa, but each day brought only more disappointment. Her birthday in February was particularly hard. Melissa usually called to wish her well, even when she was busy, but this time there was no call. Norma finally understood that her daughter's silence was not a mistake. Something awful must have happened. What could have caused Melissa to leave her previous life behind? Norma and Carl struggled to understand. They remembered how their youngest daughter was always cheerful and affectionate. From a young age, she stood out among her peers, actively joining school beauty pageants and assisting her older sister, Tina, with her projects. They had dreamed together of opening a veterinary clinic to rescue as many animals as possible. However, those dreams faded when Melissa's teenage rebellion began, leading her into trouble with legal issues, running away from home, and her first serious relationship. Christopher became her sole support during those challenging times when she felt caught between her parents' rules and her desire to discover herself. Marriage brought changes to her life. making it seem like everything was finally falling into place. She moved to the city with Christopher, had children, and their life looked happy. However, her parents sensed something was wrong beneath the surface. They felt a deep unease. In January 1999, standing in the empty apartment on Brooklyn Avenue, their concerns became real. They were overwhelmed with questions. What had happened to their daughter and her family? Why were all leads fruitless? Why did their search for answers continually hit dead ends? Why hadn't any of the neighbors seen Melissa since New Year's? What happened to her children? These small details took on a dark significance, suggesting something much more troubling was going on. Leaving the situation unresolved felt like a betrayal. So Norma continued her search for information, clutching at any clues to understand what had happened to her cherished daughter. What began as a simple family holiday had turned into a desperate quest. No one could have anticipated the truth that awaited them, a truth that would change their lives forever. The management at the bakery, where Melissa worked, reported that she hadn't been seen for over a month. Her co-workers mentioned that she simply stopped coming to work, as if she had disappeared without a trace. No one was sure if she had found another job. They explained that one day she just didn't show up for her shift and didn't provide any notice. Some co-workers even went to her home, but it was futile. Neighbors simply shrugged and said the family had moved away, but no one knew their new location. As time went on, Carl and Norma grew increasingly anxious as there was still no news from Melissa. They were worried sick, praying for their daughter's safe return. With each month that passed, their hope dimmed, but they held on to it tightly as if it were their only lifeline. They struggled to understand why Melissa hadn't reached out, since she had always maintained a close connection with them, even during her difficult teenage years. It felt like they were trapped in a nightmare. By January 2000, the Patton family was becoming increasingly worried. Norma reported Melissa missing to the police, prompting an investigation. Detectives quickly found Melissa's husband, Christopher, who had also been out of touch. He eventually returned, but Melissa and the children were still missing. Christopher stated that Melissa had left voluntarily, pursuing her dream of a new life in California. However, Norma and Carl knew their daughter well. They were convinced she would never simply vanish without any explanation. Although the parents were convinced that Christopher was concealing information, the police found no reason to take further action. Melissa was an adult and had the right to go to California if she chose to do so, since her husband had not reported her missing. The police did not consider her a missing person, as there was no evidence of any crime. The investigation reached a standstill. Christopher maintained that Melissa had been preparing for this move for some time by working extra shifts at the bakery, saving money, and occasionally renting a hotel room to avoid a long commute after tiring hours. He claimed this was her way of getting ready for a new chapter in her life. One day, she simply did not return, and Christopher believed she had finally gone through with her plan to leave for California on her own. He emphasized that there was nothing peculiar about her departure, attributing it to Melissa's wish to start anew. Detectives aimed to pressure Christopher by discussing his past. His childhood was filled with difficulties. While they did engage in some minor trouble, their lives mostly revolved around impulsive choices even before their marriage. However, they soon became evident that Christopher wasn't being completely honest. Records revealed that Melissa had filed multiple complaints regarding domestic abuse. She reported that the aggression extended beyond just him raising his hand. On one occasion, he reportedly gave her banned substance and dragged her down the street by her hair, disregarding her cries for help. When Christopher learned of these allegations, he filed a counterclaim, complicating the legal situation. During one hearing, Christopher requested to speak with Melissa privately. After a brief, unheard conversation, Melissa decided to drop her complaint and went home with him, simply stating, "They have kids, after all." After Melissa disappeared, Christopher took an unexpected step. He moved out of their home and went to live with relatives. The children stayed with their grandmother, and Christopher only visited them occasionally. It seemed as though he was trying to distance himself from his past life. The children quickly adapted to life without their mother and only thought of their father when he showed up at the grandmother's house. Norma Patton had never liked Christopher. She believed he was the reason Melissa left home just after finishing high school. To her, this marriage was a source of disappointment and pain. He was never who he pretended to be. She often remarked, while looking at photos of her daughter, now that Melissa was gone, those words felt eerily prophetic. As the details of the past started to come to light, a troubling and darker image of the Wolfenbarger family took shape, revealing that their happiness was just a facade. Tina Patton shared a memory with detectives about noticing a bruise on Melissa's neck that looked like a handprint. Melissa broke down in tears and pleaded with Tina not to tell anyone. Christopher Wolfenbarger, Melissa's husband, frequently changed his story. Initially, he said the last time he saw Melissa was in December 1998. However, during questioning in the spring of 2000, he unexpectedly claimed that he had seen her on the street close to their home in March or April of 1999. This inconsistency raised further suspicions without providing any clear answers in the case. In 2003, 5 years later, the Patton family was back in the news, but this time the focus was on Carl Patton. He had been arrested due to a serious crime. It was revealed that Carl had previously encountered legal issues in the mid-1980s when he served a brief sentence for theft and was released on parole. Although he had attempted to avoid further trouble, his past eventually caught up with him. Over 20 years later, DNA evidence connected him to a crime. On February 23, 2003, Carl was taken into custody for the murder of 31-year-old Liddy Matthew Evans, which occurred in 1977. Her body had been discovered in a river, wrapped in a sleeping bag and attached to a concrete block, with a gunshot wound to the head as the cause of death. This incident was not the only crime linked to Carl. After Carl's arrest, his wife Norma made a surprising decision. She agreed to testify against him in exchange for immunity. This arrangement was finalized, and Norma began sharing detailed testimony that shocked everyone. She revealed that between 1970 and 1977, Carl and his friend Joe Cleveland committed several crimes, starting with the murder of Carl's uncle, Fred Wyatt, and his uncle's girlfriend, Carl, fearing that Norma knew too much, persuaded her to help eliminate any possible witnesses. Norma recounted that on December 17, 1977, Carl brought his uncle and his uncle's girlfriend to their home, where he used a shotgun to kill them. Afterward, he and Norma wrapped the bodies in sleeping bags, added weights, and disposed of them in the river. Norma cleaned the house and removed the blood, while Carl burned the blood-stained couch in the backyard. However, they did not clean the trunk of their van, which had bloodstains. When investigators discovered blood in the trunk that matched the victim's blood type, Carl and Norma were questioned, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge them at that time. It wasn't until 25 years later, when DNA testing confirmed Carl's involvement, that he was arrested on February 23, 2003. After Carl's arrest, rumors started to spread regarding his possible involvement in Melissa's disappearance. Some people speculated that Melissa could have been harmed by her father, fearing that family members might speak out. However, there was no solid evidence to back this claim. Carl strongly denied any wrongdoing, stating he would never harm his daughter. He only dealt with those who threatened his family. Yet many sensed an unsettling truth behind his words. The doubts about Carl weren't limited to Melissa's case. There were also whispers of his connections to criminal organizations in the southern U.S. dating back to the 1960s. He had gained a reputation as a ruthless shooter, despite consistently denying any involvement in illegal activities. In 2003, while investigating the death of Fred Wyatt, his partner Norma disclosed that Carl was motivated by greed. Fred's official marriage meant that his wife would receive an insurance payout, and she had enlisted Carl to deal with her cheating husband. After 25 years, Carl Patton was finally arrested and convicted, but that was not enough. When the news about the reopened Melissa Wolfenbarger case appeared in the newspapers, a forensic expert contacted Sergeant Raymond Layton to inform him that they had been holding unidentified remains at their facility for 4 years. These remains were body parts discovered in different months of 1999, specifically in the area where Melissa's family lived. Back in 1999, when Melissa had been missing for 5 months, on April 29, 1999, authorities from the Atlanta Police Department found a severed human head in a black garbage bag on Avon Avenue Street near Hartford Street. According to Sergeant Layton, the gruesome discovery was made near the glass manufacturing company where her husband, Christopher Wolfenbarger, worked and where he had been fired after being suspected of stealing a hacksaw. Sergeant Layton said, on June 3, 1999, several dismembered human body parts were found in black garbage bags in a wooded area between Hartford Place and Avon Avenue. The body parts found included legs, arms, and feet, but the torso was never located. At that time, the remains were still unidentified. Melissa Wolfenbarger was still missing. However, her mother, Norma, said she knew it was only a matter of time before the remains would be identified as her daughter's. Therefore, she continued to watch the news every day for 4 years. It took years for the remains found on Avon Avenue to be identified as Melissa's. Carl Patton, Melissa's father, learned the heartbreaking news while he was in prison. He was overwhelmed with grief upon finding out that his daughter's dismembered remains had been discovered shortly after her disappearance, but had not yet been identified. The most devastating part for him was that DNA testing, which could have clarified what happened to Melissa, was not done until almost 4 years after his arrest. This delay resulted in lost time and crucial evidence that could have helped solve the case much earlier. Forensic analysis showed that Melissa's neck had been cut with a saw, and her skull had been bleached. This led experts to initially think the remains were male. The bleach also hindered the ability to tell if the injuries happened before or after her death. Her head and limbs were placed in trash bags and discarded along busy roads, complicating efforts to track the suspect's vehicle. The exact time and cause of death are still unknown, as her torso was never located. Christopher was questioned again after his wife's identity was confirmed. He told investigators that he had been cooperative from the beginning and provided all the information he had years ago. He claimed he had no reason to hurt Melissa, noting that there was no life insurance, no assets, and no debts involved. Christopher pointed out that he would never have left her remains near his workplace, as it would only raise suspicion. He even spoke to reporters, expressing his belief that Melissa had changed her name and started a new life elsewhere, and he hoped she would return one day, especially for their children's sake. This is why he never reported her missing. Tina, Melissa's older sister, felt the loss more than anyone else. For her, it wasn't just an open case, it was a continuous source of anguish. She often had nightmares in which Melissa cried out for help, but Tina was unable to save her. Meanwhile, Carl, who was in prison, transformed as well. He yearned for justice for his daughter, but felt powerless. For the first time, he genuinely understood the suffering experienced by the families of his own victims. The most surprising part of this story is that Carl, a convicted criminal, dedicated his last years to seeking justice for his daughter Melissa. Although he clearly loved her, her death remained unsolved. Her remains had been discovered, but no one had been arrested or charged. In 2017, Norma Patton reached out again, this time contacting Cheryl McCollum, an investigator who specializes in cold cases. Cheryl, known for her true crime podcasts and shows, first met Norma at a formal dinner. That evening, Norma approached her and immediately said her daughter was decapitated and she needed Cheryl help. This marked the start of a new investigation. Cheryl recognized that the case would be challenging, so she advised Norma to review all the evidence again. She arranged a new search of the wooded area where the bags containing the remains were discovered years earlier, hoping to find even a small clue to help solve the mystery. However, their efforts had not yielded any results so far. Norma remained determined and believed that the truth about her daughter's death would eventually emerge. Meanwhile, Cheryl persisted in her investigation of the Melissa Wolfenberger case, searching for that one crucial detail that could uncover the entire story. When investigator Cheryl started her work, she could not have anticipated the many hidden details she would uncover. Right from the beginning, she began exchanging letters with Carl Patton, Melissa's father. In these letters, Carl shared his memories and his suspicions about who was responsible for his daughter's disappearance. He repeatedly pointed to her husband, Christopher Wolfenberger. Carl was clear in his feelings about his son-in-law. He believed Christopher had negatively impacted his daughter's life from the very start of their relationship. Melissa used to be a happy and vibrant person, but everything changed when Christopher came into her life. Carl believes that Christopher influenced her to sneak out of the house at night to meet him, taught her how to steal, and even attempted to steal Carl's car twice in order to run away to California with Christopher. After Melissa became pregnant and had their daughter, Christopher's control over her intensified. He worked to cut her off from her parents, so Norma and Carl only got to see their granddaughter, Christina, when Christopher was at work. Melissa would speak in a scared whisper, worried that she would get into serious trouble if her husband found out that her parents had visited. Carl remembered how Melissa ignored his warnings. Even with the constant bruises on her arms and neck from Christopher, she thought she could turn her life around. But when she didn't come for Christmas, Carl sensed something was seriously wrong. He suspected that Christopher was connected to her disappearance, but he found it difficult to prove. What troubled Carl the most was that his grandchildren didn't realize their mother hadn't left to begin a new life. She was gone forever. In his letters, Carl explained how he attempted to help with the investigation while he was in prison. He encouraged the experts to look for DNA traces in the trash bags with the remains, pointing out that the person who tied the knots might have left evidence behind. He mentioned, "There's no such thing as a perfect crime," yet the police never found any evidence connecting Christopher to the case. Carl remained hopeful that the investigation would eventually produce results. In one of his letters, Carl thanked Cheryl for her support and mentioned that he only realized the severity of his own actions after losing his daughter. This profound loss helped him understand the pain experienced by the families of his victims. He hoped that one day his grandchildren would learn the truth about their mother. Cheryl also met with Norma several times, during which Norma expressed her strong belief that Christopher was responsible for her daughter's death. However, detectives were still unable to link Christopher to Melissa's disappearance. Cheryl McCollum looked into the idea of involving Liddy Evans's children, who is one of Carl's victims, to determine if any family members might have a reason to seek revenge. The police entertained the theory that someone related to Carl's past crimes could have wanted to retaliate, but this idea was soon dismissed. Carl's criminal activities only became known years after Melissa went missing. Liddy's children decided to participate in a podcast interview to share her story, believing that Melissa deserved justice, even though her father was a criminal. One of the forensic experts discussed the autopsy results. He suggested that Melissa's dismemberment could have happened at the glass company where Christopher was employed, rather than at home. The remains were discovered at a dump site close to the building, and all the tools needed for dismemberment were accessible there. However, the police did not find any blood or DNA evidence at the facility, which made it impossible to confirm this theory. It was still uncertain where the crime occurred and, crucially, who was responsible for it. Cheryl paid close attention to every detail. She hired specialists, reviewed all case materials, and maintained constant communication with Carl. All the experts agreed on one point: Christopher was the most likely suspect. Cheryl expressed that she would stake her reputation on ensuring the perpetrator was caught. Melissa's story was the first episode of her podcast, which she launched in February 2023. In April 2024, a listener reached out to her, claiming to have seen a confrontation between Melissa and Christopher at a party. This revelation reinvigorated the case, providing new momentum. Investigators resumed their work with fresh determination. In early August, after over 20 years of uncertainty, Christopher Wolfenbarger was arrested on suspicion of a serious crime. Detectives revisited old leads, re-interviewed witnesses, and utilized new technology to gather information. When officers arrived at his home, he attempted to hide behind a dryer, which one officer noted was not typical behavior for an innocent person. While Christopher maintained his innocence, the charges against him had already been filed. Norma and Tina attended the press conference. Norma folded her hands and prayed quietly upon hearing the news of the arrest. The police had not revealed all the evidence behind the arrest, and Christopher's motives remained unclear. However, one thing was certain. Over 25 years after Melissa's disappearance, her family finally felt a renewed hope for justice. Court records show that Christopher Wolfenbarger's attorney requested a Fulton County Superior Court judge to dismiss the case, citing the state's delay in filing an indictment after the alleged crime. The judge disagreed with the defense's arguments regarding the Fifth and 14th Amendments, allowing the case to proceed to trial. A new trial has been scheduled for May 5, 2025. Christopher remains in custody at the Fulton County Jail. On the night of November 25 to 26, 2022, in the quiet French village of Prahek, 22-year-old Leslie Hurlbecker and 21-year-old Kevin Trompat went missing. They had come to Prahek for a relaxing getaway with friends. However, the next morning, their belongings were still there, but they were nowhere to be found. What happened that night? Leslie Hurlbecker grew up in a small town near Prahek, where she created many cherished memories with her family during her childhood. Her mother was always supportive of Leslie's interests and hobbies. After her mother's passing, Leslie found it difficult to cope, but her twin brother provided strong support, helping her maintain her self-confidence. They shared a deep bond and valued even the smallest moments together. Known for her outgoing nature, Leslie had a talent for connecting with others. Her friends and acquaintances recognized her love for animals, especially her dog Onyx, who was more than just a pet. He was her true companion. Leslie often remarked that Onyx understood her emotions better than anyone else. After finishing school, Leslie launched her own house painting business, dedicating herself fully to it. Her company gradually expanded and gained new clients. Leslie felt immense pride in creating something from the ground up. To her, it was more than just a job. It represented her independence and personal success. Kevin Trompat faced difficult challenges growing up. With his father in prison, Kevin had to mature quickly and hide his vulnerabilities, striving to be a strong support for his family. Despite these hardships, he remained kind and enjoyed sharing his passions with friends. One of his favorite activities was exploring nature. He frequently went hiking, took long bike rides, and appreciated the outdoors. Kevin dreamed of making this love for nature a central part of his life. He purchased an old van, started converting it, hoping to travel and possibly work from it in the future. Leslie and Kevin met at a party thrown by their mutual friend, Tom Trullet. They began with light conversation, but it soon became clear that they shared many interests. Leslie discussed her business goals, while Kevin talked about his plans for converting a van. Right from their initial conversation, their connection felt authentic. There were no facades, just two people being their true selves. Their relationship developed rapidly. In just a few weeks, they became close companions, enjoying each other's company, discussing future travels together. Leslie was excited that Kevin shared her passion for animals and encouraged her interests. Kevin, on the other hand, appreciated her honesty and her talent for really listening. In November, Leslie and Kevin planned a short escape from their daily routines. They picked Prahek, a quaint rural town in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region of western France, which has a population of just over 2,000. It is known for its tranquility and welcoming atmosphere, making it an ideal destination. Their simple plan was to spend one night in Prahek before heading to Bordeaux, a city they had always wanted to visit. They intended for this to be a relaxed getaway for the two of them, reconnecting with friends and enjoying a new environment. That night, Leslie and Kevin stayed with their friends, Tom Trouillet and Nicolas Renaud, whose homes were only 30 feet apart. They arrived in Prague on the evening of November 25th and left some belongings at Tom's house. With their dog, Onyx, they then went to Nicholas's house to spend time together. They brought only a few essentials for the night. The atmosphere at Nicholas's home was relaxed, featuring music, drinks, and friendly conversations. Leslie and Kevin seemed at ease as they discussed their future plans, showing no signs of concern. Nicholas welcomed them warmly, and everything appeared to be normal. No one could have predicted that it would be their last night together. Leslie and Kevin only intended to stay briefly at Nicholas's house. Most of their belongings were still at Tom's place, and Onyx, their pet, was with them as usual. Leslie always brought him along. According to Nicholas, the night was like any normal gathering among friends, filled with casual conversations about life and future plans, without any issues. Around 3 a.m., Leslie and Kevin decided to return to Tom's house. Nicholas offered them a place to stay for the night, but they politely declined, preferring to sleep at Tom's where their things were. His house was just 30 feet away, and they felt confident they could get there without any problems. Then, Leslie and Kevin left Nicholas's house with their dog. They headed towards Tom's. That was the last sighting of them. They never arrived at Tom's place. Their clothes and belongings were still at Tom's, which concerned friends and family. By the next morning, it became evident that something was wrong because neither Leslie nor Kevin had contacted anyone, which was unusual for them. Nicholas informed the authorities that the evening had been calm, that they appeared to be fine. When law enforcement searched Tom's house, they found no evidence of a struggle. This marked the start of a complicated search that only grew more challenging over time. Family members were certain that Leslie and Kevin would never just vanish without notice. Leslie frequently communicated with her twin brother, and Kevin always informed his family before leaving. Initially, investigators considered the idea that the couple might have voluntarily left Prague without telling anyone. However, both families dismissed this theory, insisting it was impossible. Additionally, all of their belongings were still at Tom's house, suggesting they had only stepped away briefly with plans to return soon. Law enforcement launched an extensive search in the nearby area, including forests, open fields, all potential roads or paths Leslie and Kevin may have used that night. Local volunteers, residents, neighbors, and friends who were familiar with the area also participated in the search, determined to find any clues that could help locate Leslie and Kevin. They explored abandoned buildings, examined ravines and dirt trails, thoroughly checked every accessible spot. However, despite these efforts, they found no leads or evidence regarding Leslie and Kevin's whereabouts. Officers spoke with neighbors and local residents to see if anyone had heard anything unusual, like screams or strange noises. However, everyone reported that the night had been quiet. There were no witnesses and no physical evidence, leaving Leslie and Kevin's sudden disappearance completely baffling. The families took action, distributed missing persons posters throughout the town and nearby areas. They pursued every lead, searched for any information that might provide a clue. Their relentless efforts drew the attention of local media. The story started to appear in newspapers and on television. As awareness of the disappearance spread in the region, public pressure intensified, leaving law enforcement with no time to waste. Each day, the family's worry grew stronger. They found it hard to believe that their loved ones would just leave without explanation. They struggled to accept the possibility that Leslie and Kevin might not come back. Investigators kept gathering bits of information, minor details, witness statements, and strange rumors, but no clear answers surfaced. At that moment, no one could have foreseen how complicated the case would turn out to be. 12 hours after Leslie and Kevin were last seen, Leslie's phone showed activity in Niort. The police quickly sent a team to investigate the area. They searched nearby neighborhoods, spoke with local residents, and looked into possible routes Leslie and Kevin might have taken. However, no one reported seeing them. There was no sign of them or their belongings. 3 days later, Kevin's phone signaled a location in Fouras, a coastal town more than 50 miles away from their last known location. This raised alarm that the phones might have been moved by someone else. Authorities then began another search in Fouras, interviewing locals and searching the area. But again, they found nothing. After that, both phones stopped functioning, making it even more difficult for the police to track Leslie and Kevin's movements. A significant development in the case occurred on December 8th, when an employee at a waste processing facility contacted the police after discovering personal items in a clothing bin at the Le Relais Association in Puy-Revaux. The items included Kevin's travel pass, the clothes and work tools, as well as the makeup bag. Investigators quickly arrived at the scene to collect the evidence for analysis. Both families confirmed that the items were indeed Leslie's and Kevin's. This find dramatically changed the course of the investigation. The initial theory that the couple had left voluntarily was no longer plausible, as it was evident they would not have discarded such personal belongings without a good reason. Investigators now suspected a criminal case. By mid-December 2022, the investigation took a new direction. Police began to focus on Tom Trullet, who had offered them his house and was one of the last people to see them alive. He was questioned several times to clarify the events of that night. Tom initially claimed that he left for a party on the evening of November 25th and did not return until early the next morning. However, geolocation data from his phone revealed that he had stayed in Prague the entire night. This information raised significant concerns for the investigators. Additionally, the police obtained message logs between Tom and Leslie. In a text sent at 2:53 a.m., Leslie mentioned that she wasn't feeling well after taking a substance Tom had given her. This message became crucial evidence, as Tom had never mentioned this incident before. Tom was arrested on February 28, 2023, after authorities suspected he played a significant role in the disappearance of Leslie and Kevin. In March 2023, investigators soon expanded their focus to include Tom's close friends, Nathan Badji, 22, and Enzo Chalat, 23, who were also taken into custody. Both men lived near where Leslie and Kevin's belongings were found, raising suspicions about their knowledge of the situation. During questioning, it became evident that Nathan and Enzo had strong ties to Tom and had been in the vicinity of Prague on the night the couple went missing. Investigators believed that they might have been involved in a coordinated effort, making it less likely that the incident was spontaneous. April 12, 2023, authorities arrested Stephen Mathieu, a fourth suspect and acquaintance of the group. He was arrested at a hotel in Le Havre, where he was a night watchman. He admitted that he had gone to La Rochelle to support his friend Nathan Badji and had met Tom Trullet on the sidelines of a techno party. The following day, he and Nathan Badji are said to have gone to a bricolage store to buy 2 bags of quicklime, a shovel, and rat poison. Phone records showed that the 2 men were in Prague when they apparently returned to Tom Trullet's house, where the pair were killed. According to Tom Trullet and Michael Zadi, this was to clean up the crime scene. That same day, Michael Zadi was arrested and detained. He is being investigated for assassination. The 3 previous suspects had been friends with Tom and were also familiar with Leslie and Kevin. This led to the theory that the crime was planned and possibly committed by a group rather than just one person. During questioning, Tom revealed that he once had feelings for Leslie. He said he had always liked her, but she only viewed him as a friend. When Leslie began dating Kevin, Tom felt rejected and humiliated. Investigators believed this emotional turmoil could have motivated the crime, suggesting it stemmed from a personal grudge that turned into a desire for revenge. Additionally, financial factors may have played a role. A close friend of Kevin's family told police that Kevin had €10,000 in cash, which he intended to use to buy a car. Tom knew about this money, and investigators thought it might have influenced his actions. During questioning, Tom alleged that Kevin was involved in selling illegal and owed him a lot of money. Kevin's family strongly denied these claims, asserting that Tom was trying to damage Kevin's reputation and deflect blame. With each round of questioning, the case became more complicated. Law enforcement was convinced that Leslie and Kevin's disappearance was not accidental. The evidence increasingly indicated a planned abduction, with each individual having a specific role in the events. After the arrests, thorough interrogations allowed authorities to piece together the events of that night. They discovered how Leslie and Kevin were taken and what transpired in the hours that followed. Tom Trullet was a key figure in the incident. He coordinated the group's actions and initiated the attack. Leslie and Kevin returned to Tom's house after visiting Nicholas. Although Tom was supposed to be at a party, he was actually at home. Later, a vehicle arrived at Tom's house with Nathan, Enzo, Stephen, and Stephen inside. They were all part of the plan and knew their roles. When Tom gave the signal, the rest of the group entered the house. They were equipped with hammers, metal rods, knives, even a sword. They barged in, while Leslie and Kevin were unsuspecting. Kevin was the first victim of the attack. Nathan and Tom hit him several times with hammers and metal tools. Leslie attempted to defend herself, but Tom quickly subdued her. Both were restrained and forced into a vehicle, along with their dog, Onyx. The vehicle was taken to a remote area where Tom and his accomplices continued to assault Kevin. He suffered severe injuries from blunt object. According to the police, he died from both internal and external trauma. Leslie was kept separate from Kevin. Eventually, Tom killed her with a sword. Their bodies were discarded in different locations. Following the instructions of Tom Trullet, on March 3, 2023, Kevin Trompett's body was discovered in a forest in Puy-Ravoux, while Leslie Hurlbeck's body was found on March 4 in a forest in the commune of Verson. Both burial sites were in secluded, difficult-to-reach areas, which investigators recognized as an attempt to hide evidence. The whereabouts of Onyx are uncertain. The suspects claimed they released the dog on a nearby road, but police had doubts about this. In January 2023, the remains of a dog matching Onyx's description were discovered near Prague, but due to decomposition, it could not be definitively identified. Leslie's family believed that Onyx died alongside her. Medical examiners arrived at the scene shortly after the bodies were found. Their job was to determine the cause of death and the circumstances surrounding it. During the examination, they noted that both bodies were significantly decomposed, but there were clear signs of violent behavior. Experts observed several broken bones and numerous bruises. They believed these injuries were likely inflicted by heavy metal objects, such as rods, baseball bats, or metal hammers. The autopsy also revealed deep cuts that suggested the use of a large knife or machete. This evidence confirmed that Leslie and Kevin suffered a brutal attack and were killed in a particularly cruel manner. The medical examiners concluded that both victims died from excessive blood loss, resulting from a combination of internal bleeding and external wounds. Based on the timeline, experts estimated that they were killed on the night they disappeared. After the attack and killings, Tom and his associates took measures to eliminate any evidence. Tom returned to his home to destroy anything that could link him to the crime, while the rest of the group was responsible for getting rid of the couple's belongings. This is how their items ended up in Puy-Ravoux. The police based their investigation on several important points, including Tom's personal grudge against Leslie and a supposed argument with Kevin regarding a debt. The money Kevin had on him also seemed to play a role. Tom reportedly told investigators that the money was shared among the group. As new witness testimonies came in, conflicting statements arose. Some witnesses stated that everyone participated in attacking Kevin, while others insisted that only Tom and Nathan were involved. This inconsistency made the investigation more difficult. Medical reports indicated markings typical of being restrained. Scrapes on their wrists and forearms suggested that Leslie and Kevin may have been tied up or held against their will before they were killed. For the victims' families, these findings confirmed their deepest fears. For law enforcement, however, it provided important evidence of premeditated murder and the brutal treatment of the victims. Medical examiners carefully gathered all evidence to ensure there would be no doubt in court about who was guilty of the crime. Kevin's funeral was held on March 16th in New York. It was attended not only by close family and friends, but also by neighbors, acquaintances, even strangers who had heard about the tragedy in the news. 2 days later, on March 18th, Leslie's memorial took place in La Rochelle. Both events drew many people wanting to support the families to honor the memories of Leslie and Kevin. Flowers were placed, candles were lit, words of sympathy were exchanged. At Kevin's funeral, his father, Guy Trompat, publicly blamed the 5 suspects for ruining 2 families, causing immense suffering to them. His heartfelt remarks struck a chord with those in attendance. Many people shared his grief and offered their condolences. Following the service, Guy organized a march to honor both his son and Leslie. The procession moved through the streets of Deux-Sèvres and nearby towns. In his speech, Guy expressed how losing a son creates a permanent wound, demanded that those responsible be brought to justice. Soon after, Guy found himself at the center of controversy. He was accused of attempting to hire someone to take revenge on the suspects for Kevin and Leslie's deaths. Investigators claimed Guy had spoken with a woman about the possibility of paying $110,000 to eliminate the suspects. However, he strongly denied these allegations, asserting that any such discussions may have taken place without his knowledge and that he was not involved in any malicious plans. Kevin's father, Guy Trompat, was sentenced on June 2, 2023 by the New York court to 18 months in prison, 6 of which were suspended, along with a 5-year ban on possessing weapons and the revocation of his hunting license for threatening to kill. A €100,000 bounty was allegedly promised to anyone who killed the suspects or their relatives. However, he was acquitted of inciting murder without supervision. Marie-Thérèse Garcia, the aunt of Leslie Hurlbeck, was indicted on May 25th on charges of kidnapping and confinement in an organized gang, murder, and possession of weapons, and was subsequently remanded in custody. She is accused of threatening individuals involved in the disappearance of Leslie and Kevin. Investigators from the Versailles Crime Squad have linked this case to that of Corinne, whose body was found decapitated and dismembered in an iron chest. Marie-Thérèse Garcia was identified as a potential suspect in that murder, which took place in the 1980s. She was arrested for the crime in 2007 following accusations from her daughter, arrested and charged 2 months later. Marie-Thérèse Garcia is currently in pretrial detention and maintains her innocence. She was reinterrogated by the investigating judge on August 11th. Tom Trouillet and his associates, Nathan Baji, Enzo Chala, Steven Mathieu, Mikkel Zadi, were in custody while waiting for their trial. For the families of Leslie and Kevin, these court proceedings offered a chance to seek answers and achieve justice. During this time, the families focused on keeping Leslie and Kevin's memories alive by sharing stories about Leslie's ambitions for her business and Kevin's goal of completing his van renovation. Ahead lay the most crucial phase, the trial. Both families and the public anticipated this event as the pivotal moment that could bring closure to their story. In early 2025, the 5 accused, Tom, Nathan, Enzo, Steven, and Michael, faced court. They were charged with kidnapping, homicide, and hiding the bodies. Each remained in custody, awaiting the final verdict. The trial is ongoing, complicated by the defendants' partial denials of guilt and conflicting testimonies, making the court's work difficult. In France, aggravated homicide, especially when involving kidnapping and body concealment, carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. Under French law, life imprisonment means the convicted person may apply for parole no sooner than 30 years. At the time of the trial, prosecutors were demanding the maximum sentences, life imprisonment for all 5, emphasizing the severity of their crimes. The court will issue a final ruling after thoroughly reviewing all evidence, witness statements, and expert reports. Meanwhile, Leslie and Kevin's families continue to wait for the verdict. The trial's outcome remains unconfirmed as of March 2025, with proceedings ongoing.
Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Ashley Fallis. Ashley Fallis married her high school sweetheart right after finishing school, but their marriage lasted only a few years. During that time, she had 2 daughters. When the relationship ended, Ashley, just over 20 years old, she returned to her hometown with her children to live near her mother, Jenna, and stepfather, Joel. She found work as a respiratory therapist. Helping patients with breathing and heart issues became the sole provider for her family. Life was difficult, as her ex-husband was not involved in raising their daughters. Despite these hardships, Ashley was described by her mother and stepfather as cheerful, kind, and funny. She and her mother were particularly close, sharing a bond like best friends. In April 2007, Ashley met Tom Fallis, who seemed responsible and ready for family life. Unlike her ex-husband, their relationship progressed quickly, and a few months later, Ashley became pregnant with her 3rd child. 9 months later, they welcomed a son, Blake. 2 weeks after Blake's birth, Ashley and Tom got married. Tom also adopted Ashley's older daughters, however. Ashley's mother and stepfather felt she had rushed into having another child, like marrying Tom and entrusting him with her daughters. Despite knowing him for only a short time, the family settled in Evans, a small town about an hour north of Denver, Colorado. Ashley continued her work as a respiratory therapist, while Tom took a job as a correctional officer with the Weld County Sheriff's Office. Jenna admitted she found Tom strange from the start. She said, "I didn't like his mindset. He always thought he was right about everything." Tom came across as aggressive, hot-tempered, and controlling toward Ashley. Jenna often tried to convince Ashley to leave her relationship with Tom. Things took a dramatic turn when their youngest son, Blake, was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, a condition causing fluid to build up in the brain. Ashley became focused on researching treatment options for Blake, who had to undergo several major surgeries and required constant care. The stress severely affected Ashley, leaving her depressed, anxious, and irritable. Caring for Blake's health also put a heavy strain on Ashley and Tom's relationship, leading to frequent arguments. By the summer of 2011, Ashley started contemplating divorce. However, Tom encouraged her to seek help from a psychotherapist. After starting medication, Ashley's mental health improved, and their relationship appeared to stabilize. By December 2011, the Fallis family decided to host a New Year's Eve party at their home, inviting family and friends. The preparations for the holiday provided a much distraction from their challenges. Just a few days before the celebration, Ashley discovered she was pregnant again. Filled with joy, she chose to stop taking her medication to protect the baby. For a brief moment, it seemed things were improving for the Fallis family, and thoughts of divorce faded away. Unfortunately, their happiness was short-lived. On the afternoon of December 31, 2011, Ashley started bleeding and feared she was having a miscarriage. Despite her worry, she continued getting ready for the party. That evening, guests started arriving at the Fallis' home, including Tom's parents, Ashley's mother and stepfather, her uncle, and several family friends. The atmosphere was lively, as everyone enjoyed chatting and celebrating together. However, tension between Tom and Ashley became evident. They exchanged harsh remarks and occasionally argued during the evening. Ashley confided in a friend, saying she always knew that Tom hates her. Despite the conflict, Ashley and Tom still celebrated the new year with their guests as the party wound down and people began leaving. Ashley's uncle offered her illegal substances. Tom overheard this and became enraged. He scolded Ashley and accused her of unacceptable behavior. In the heat of the argument, Tom revealed to everyone that Ashley's 4th pregnancy had ended earlier that day. He shouted that Ashley always followed her mother's advice rather than thinking for herself. After the quarrel, Ashley went to put her children to bed. while her parents prepared to leave at 12:40 a.m. Ashley stepped outside to say goodbye to her mother and stepfather, noticing that Ashley seemed upset. Her mother, Jenna, asked what was wrong. Ashley responded, "It's okay, Mom, it's just Tom. He's like that." She hugged her parents goodbye while Tom stood on the porch, waving as they drove away. Afterward, Ashley and Tom went back inside the house, where the atmosphere was tense, following a brief argument about illegal substances. The two went their separate ways. Tom went into the wardrobe to change when he suddenly heard the sound of a weapon being loaded in the bedroom. Knowing Ashley kept a weapon under her mattress, Tom shouted, asking what was going on, and hurried toward the bedroom. Before he could reach her, he heard the explosion. Tom rushed into the room and found Ashley lying on the floor, smoke lingering in the air. She had been injured in the back of the head. In a panic, Tom grabbed her, pressed his hand against the wound to stop the bleeding, and called 911 at 12:50 a.m. as Ashley lay unconscious but still alive. Tom gently closed her eyes and spoke to her, saying, "I'm here. You won't go. You won't leave me." In the early hours of New Year's Day, 2012, the Evans Police Department responded to an emergency call from the Fallis family home. The neighborhood was known to be safe, with low crime rates. Upon arrival, paramedics rushed Ashley to the hospital due wound to her head. Unfortunately, her injuries were critical, and Ashley passed away a few hours later. The police detained Tom at the scene. He was covered in blood and claimed that his wife had self-harm. He also mentioned that Ashley and her mother had attended a party earlier that evening, and Ashley had been very upset, however. Suspicions quickly arose when a neighbor reported hearing screams from the house. The neighbor stated she heard Ashley screaming, begging Tom to get off her and let her go. During his interrogation, Tom denied the accusations. He stated that he did not witness his wife pulling the trigger and denied assaulting her at any time. During the interrogation, investigators asked Tom to undress so they could examine his body. They found fresh scratches on his chest. Tom explained the scratches by claiming he had injured himself while shaving his chest for the first time, which caused itching. Throughout the questioning, Tom appeared visibly nervous and anxious, but consistently denied having any physical contact with Ashley. In the Fallis bedroom, significant evidence suggested that a conflict had occurred. Photographs had been torn off the wall, hinting at a fight, and divorce papers were found displayed on the wall. Ashley also had bruises on her legs, according to Ashley's mother. Tom had been very angry with them when they said goodbye at the party. At the end of the party, he even shouted, "I want you all to die." Despite this evidence, Tom was released without charges. After the interrogation, Ashley's parents were heartbroken and couldn't understand why he was released so easily. Jenna was convinced that her daughter would never willingly leave her children. Ashley loved life and had plans for the future. On January 5, 2012, the medical examiner concluded that Ashley had died from a weapon wound to the back of the head and ruled it self-harm. 2 months later, the case was officially closed. Ashley's grieving parents struggled to accept this conclusion. Eventually, Tom and his children moved to Indiana, where he pursued graduate school. Despite their suspicions, Ashley's parents tried to maintain a good relationship with Tom to stay connected with their grandchildren. However, they never stopped believing that their daughter's death was caused by Tom. 2 years passed until, in early 2014, a local television reporter, Justin Joseph, began his own investigation into the Ashley Fallis case. Joseph spent months interviewing neighbors and investigating the case. After 4 months, the case took a significant turn. A young neighbor of Tom, his name is Nick Glover, revealed an important detail to Joseph. Nick and his mother, Kathy Glover, claimed he heard Tom yelling at his parents outside the house, saying, "God, I can't believe I did this," when his parents asked, "What are you saying?" Tom reportedly yelled, "I attacked her." Nick had informed the police immediately after the tragedy, and his statement was written down. However, no mention of Nick Glover's and Kathy account was found in the official police report. Joseph's report also uncovered another person who confirmed that Tom had confessed. A local police was present at the scene of the tragedy stated that Tom admitted to attack Ashley. Another neighbor also told the reporter that, on the night of the incident, she had called to the police, saying Tom attacked his wife. However, the police report misrepresented this information, stating instead that a woman had called to report that Ashley had self-harm. She also told the police that she had heard Ashley screaming from the Fallis family home, saying, "Leave me alone." Despite this, at that time, the neighbor was not questioned further, which was considered a serious omission since she was a key witness that night. Ashley's parents believed the police had rushed to close the case and blamed Ashley for her own death, despite the circumstantial evidence. Thanks to Joseph's investigative work, Chief Rick Brandt began to reevaluate the case and the actions of his officers, who had quickly hushed it up. This time, the Fort Collins Police Department took over the investigation. They considered the testimonies of the neighbors who heard Ashley screaming. Tom continued to deny his involvement in Ashley's death, maintaining that she had pulled the trigger herself on New Year's Eve. Curiously, more than 2 years after Ashley's death, Tom handed over to the police what he claimed was a suicide note written by Ashley. The note read, "Dear Tom, I am sorry for your pain. I am a loser in everything. I don't even love my daughters and son. I love you, but I just can't stand this life anymore." In November 2014, Tom Fallis was charged with the death of Ashley Fallis. He was detained and arrested in Indiana after 3 years of freedom, thinking he had escaped justice. In March 2016, a trial was held against Tom. During the trial, Tom's lawyer argued that he could not have killed his beloved wife, the mother of his 3 children. The lawyer claimed that Ashley had been struggling with mental health issues. He presented documents showing that Ashley had been diagnosed with a mental illness in the summer of 2011. The defense argued that she was impulsive, prone to self-destruction, and had been very drunk on the night of her death. They also claimed that she had suffered a miscarriage on New Year's Eve, further contributing to her distress. Ashley's uncle, however, stated that their family did not believe Ashley had taken her self-harm. They were convinced that Tom was responsible for her death. Ashley's therapist also insisted that his patient had no self-destructive tendencies. He confirmed that she was taking certain medications. However, the doctor did not know that. In addition to them, she was prescribed prescription medicine from other specialists. Ashley apparently hid another important thing from the doctor: information, including the alleged suicide notes she wrote. It turned out that Ashley had written 2 similar notes, one of which was dated July 24, 2011. Ashley's mother, Jenna, insisted that her daughter was fine. But Tom behaved inappropriately that night. He was overly angry and aggressive toward her and toward Ashley. Jenna said that at the end of the party, she watched as Tom walked up the stairs, stood right in front of Ashley, and told Ashley, "I hate you all, and I wish you all died." Then he went into the bedroom and slammed the door loudly. Rick also testified at the trial, confirming that he heard Tom confess to his parents that he attacked his wife. However, his parents denied this information and fully supported their son. A forensic expert who spent 400 hours studying the case explained to the jury where Ashley's head should have been when the explosion rang out. The expert claimed Ashley pulled the trigger herself. The prosecution called a second world-renowned forensic expert, who told the jury that he had come to the opposite conclusion from the previous medical examiner. In his opinion, Tom was next to Ashley at the time of the explosion, and most likely, there was a struggle between the spouses for the weapon, in which Tom won. The jury took only 3.5 hours to reach their verdict. Tom was found not guilty of second-degree murder and of all less serious crimes. Tom was free again. He refused to give any comments to journalists and the media. The jury explained that they believed that Ashley was mentally ill, which is why she self-harmed. Ashley's parents still don't believe that their daughter could abandon 3 children and voluntarily end her life. They are very upset that Tom was released. Ashley's 2 daughters and son remained under the care of Tom and live in Indiana, and Ashley's parents, Jenna and Joel, received the legal right to see their grandchildren